The will of fire still burns. Prologue. It was October 10th, a day that would be forever engraved into the history of Konoha. October 10th, the day that the Kyuubi no Kitsune escaped from its Jinchuriki host and wreaked havoc all across Konoha. Thousands of lives were lost in the rampage, but their fates would not end that night thanks to the few new lives that were just brought into the world. It had come down to it. The worst-case scenario, however they were prepared. After all, it is common knowledge that when dealing with female Jinchuriki that their seal is at its weakest point during childbirth. And that is exactly the case with Uzumaki Kushina. Not only was she pregnant, but she was pregnant with quadruplets. That in itself would be a problem if she wasn't Uzumaki, but she was, and that is exactly how she survived the Kyuubi, escaping its seal just a moment after she gave birth to her final child. And with that, she drifted into unconsciousness. Village outskirts. Namake's Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, was just waking up from unconsciousness. The last thing he remembered was sending away the Kyuubi's Baijidama with his most feared Justu, the Hiratian, and it blowing up a majority of the eastern side of the forest surrounding the village walls. After that, he warped away the Kyuubi and himself to the outskirts of the village. He remembered retrieving 3 of his 4 children from the hospital room where Kushina gave birth and setting up the altar for the sealing. After that, everything went black for Minato. After looking around and noticing that the area was almost completely destroyed, the young Hokage's eyes settled on the collapsed form of Sarutobi Hiruzen. Then his 3 crying children, each bearing an identical seal on their stomachs. Sandaime-sama must have knocked me out and done the sealing himself using the Shiki Fuin that I taught him in case of an emergency. Minato silently thanked Hiruzen for making the sacrifice so that he would be able to take care of his children and watch them grow up. He vowed to himself that he would do anything within his power to prevent his children from living the life that normal Jinchuriki live. Minato would make sure that they were seen as heroes of the leaf and treated like saviors. He picked up his still crying children and flashed to the Hokage Tower to announce to everyone that the Kyuubi was defeated because of his 3 children and deal with the council, while AMBU operatives collected the body of Hiruzen Sarutobi. The Yondaime's thoughts of that night would lead him through pain and suffering greater than the Kyuubi could ever cause, at the hands of the son that he had not once thought about that fateful night. Time skipped 9 years. Uzumaki Namake's estate. A young blonde-haired boy could be found in his small room on the 2nd floor. He was sitting on the windowsill, his eyes glued to the private training ground in their backyard. His eyes weren't interested in the training ground itself, however. They were fixated on the 5 figures within it. He moved out of the shadows and onto the rooftop so he could see more clearly and perhaps learn a few things that he could practice on his own later. After all, his parents had refused to teach him anything beyond unlocking his chakra at this point, while they still actively taught the boy's younger siblings. The boy's features could now clearly be seen. He had sun-kissed blonde hair in the same style as his father's, including the 2 jaw-length bangs and cold gray eyes. He stood at a height of 4 feet 2 inches, which was tall for a 9-year-old boy. However, the most distinguishing feature about this boy were small clumps of freckles that adorned his cheekbones. This boy was none other than Uzumaki Namake's Naruto. The Uzumaki Namikaze's compound was huge, to be blunt about it. It was as large as the Hyuga estate, which was right next to it, but there were a few major differences. One of them was that the Hyuga estate housed both the main family and the branch family, which equals around 100 people in total, while the Uzumaki Namikaze estate only housed 6 people. It was a large mansion with 5 bedrooms, a guest room, kitchen, 3 bathrooms, and an absolutely huge study/office where Minato and Kushina kept all of their jutsu and training methods. The second difference was that the Uzumaki Namikaze compound was comprised mostly of large training grounds, as most of the jutsu they practiced were quite destructive. But the estate didn't always look like this. No, this whole renovation with the addition of the training grounds were added at the requests of his siblings so that their training could be more efficient. Really, they were just jealous because someone named Hyuga Hinata said that their estate was bigger while Naruto's siblings were at the Hyuga estate to play. Speaking of the Uzumaki Namikaze's siblings, if you concentrate on where young Naruto is staring, you'll find them along with their parents in the distance. Yes, they were quite a distance away, so far that most of the younger Hyugas would have trouble seeing them. Naruto had always been gifted with incredible eyesight. Why? Who knows? It is likely that the leftover Kyuubi chakra that he inherited when he was born from Kushina was concentrated into and melded with his eyes. At the training ground stood the Yondaime Hokage, dressed in his usual attire. Standing next to him was his wife Uzumaki Kushina. She wore a yellow short-sleeved battle kimono that stopped at her mid-thighs with spandex shorts underneath, black tights that reached above her knees, and dark blue shinobi sandals. Before them were 3 of their children trying, but failing miserably at tree climbing because of their terrible chakra control due to possessing the Kyuubi's In, Yang, and leftover chakra respectively. There was one thing in common with all 3 of Uzumaki Namikaze's siblings in the training ground. All 3 of them looked about 3 years younger than their older brother Naruto, even though they were only a few minutes apart. The reason why they looked so much younger than their brother was because of the demonic chakra sealed within them. It took a while for the Kyuubi's chakra to adjust to their own chakra networks, and even longer for bodies to adjust to the amount of power, close to 3 years. The one climbing the tree farthest to the left was a young girl who stood at about 3 feet 5 inches. She had silky red hair, just like her mother's, that went down to her mid-back, and deep violet eyes. She was extremely beautiful for a girl that looked only 6 years old. She held the Kyuubi's In chakra. This is Uzumaki Namikaze Natsuki. The one climbing the tree in the middle was Uzumaki Namikaze Nawaki, who stood at 3 feet 4 inches. He had short, spiky blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. He wasn't trying as hard as the other girls and seemed to not really care about the training. He was a bit on the chubby side and could easily be mistaken for an Akimichi. He held the Kyuubi's Yang chakra. On the far right was Uzumaki Namikaze Narumi, who had made it farther up the tree than the other 2 because she had less of the Kyuubi's chakra. She stood at 3 feet 5 inches and had long blonde hair that was tied into pigtails to give her a cute schoolgirl look. Her sapphire blue eyes stared at her parents arrogantly, as she had made it 15 feet up the tree because of her slightly better control, while her 2 siblings had only made it up 7. She too had 3 whisker marks on each cheek. She held the leftover Kyuubi that was saturating the atmosphere from the large amount of demonic chakra that was used by the Kyuubi 9 years ago. Naruto had seen enough. He climbed down from his position on the roof back into his bedroom after watching his mother and father smother and congratulate their children for making it so far up and making so much progress after a week of continuously practicing tree climbing. What a joke. They do the smallest little thing and receive more love and affection than I have my entire life from them. He grabbed his pouch filled with kunai and shuriken off of his dresser and left his barren room that had nothing more than the essentials within its confines. He briefly toyed with the idea of telling his parents that he was going to a secluded training ground near the outskirts of the village to do his own training, but opted against it after he recalled the last time he wanted to start his shinobi training. Flashback 6 months ago. Naruto had just woken up to the sounds of his parents walking around the house, getting ready for the day ahead of them. He could hear his mother in the kitchen getting breakfast ready, and his father was getting his siblings up to start their day. Naruto could hear Natsuki's voice asking what they would be doing for training today. His expression reflexively turned into a scowl, and his mind began to wander as he lay in bed, already forgotten. Training? They refused to help me at all, or even let me train since we unlocked our chakras 6 months ago. Naruto started to remember the reasons his parents told him why they would need to focus on his siblings. He understood that, but they haven't been doing anything besides chakra control for the past 6 months. Naruto was far from ignorant. He was smart for his age. Some would even go so far as to call him a prodigy. So he could easily see the gap that their training was putting between him and his family. And he didn't want that. Our young prodigy hadn't just been laying around all day while the rest of his family trained. He was training too. He noticed early on that, after breakfast, his mother and father would take his siblings to one of the farther away training grounds to train. They would spend all of their time there until lunchtime came around, and they came back, with the exception of his father, who made his way to the Hokage Tower for his duties sometime before then. Naruto would use this window of time to head into his father's study and find a chakra control exercise to train on until his family came back to the house. He had already mastered leaf concentration, leaf spinning, and kunai balancing. He had found out that even with his naturally large reserves, being an Uzumaki, he had naturally good chakra control, which made the exercises that much easier for him. He had also already learned how to preform what most people call the Academy 3 jutsus. Those particular jutsus being the hinge, kawarimi, and bunshin. He found them by accident when looking around in his study and decided to give them a try. He had learned them relatively easily. It only took him a few days to get a good grasp on them, and had mastered them a few days after that. If that was all the academy requires to graduate, then he wasn't going to be looking forward to his time in the academy. Our young blonde made a silent vow, one more time. I'll ask for training just one more time, and if they refuse, I'll start training even harder on my own. With those thoughts in mind, Naruto got out of bed and started heading downstairs. He saw both of his parents in the kitchen and decided to ask them after breakfast. It was a silent breakfast of pancakes, eggs, and orange juice. He sat at the end of the table. His siblings, barely awake, sat to his left. Minato sat at the head of the table, reading the paper to catch up on the daily events. Kushina had already gotten up to do the dishes before training. Naruto decided now to make his request. Tusan, Ka-san, he asked in a shy voice. Both of them looked towards the voice, wondering when he had arrived at the table. Minato glanced up from the newspaper and gave Naruto a curious look before returning back to his paper. What is it, Naruto? We were about to head off to start Nawaki's, Narumi's, and Natsuki's training. Kushina was staring intently at Naruto, intently now, knowing what he was going to ask. It's about that actually. I was wondering if you could start training me to be a shinobi too, just like them. Naruto ended hopefully. His siblings were paying close attention to the interaction going on between their parents and their older brother. Minato and Kushina both gave him a frustrated sign, knowing he wouldn't like the answer. It was Minato who responded, Naruto, you know exactly why we have to train them early. If we don't, they could lose control of themselves and hurt a lot of their classmates once all of you start going to the academy. Besides, we promised you we would only teach you the basics, and we did by helping you unlock your chakra a few weeks ago. The rest you will learn at the academy. Naruto started to get upset at those last few sentences, but the last time you helped me was 6 months ago. I know you have to help them because of the Kyuubi chakra, but all clan children start learning before they go to the academy. Minato was also starting to get a little worked up, but before he could get a word in, Kushina decided to interject herself into the argument. No buts. Kushina replied heatedly, You'll learn chakra control, basic jutsu, and taijutsu at the academy. Naruto was about to respond, but he was cut off. You will listen to your father. He is the Hokage. He knows what's best for you. And he said no, and that's final. Now go to your room and think about what we've said. Kushina yelled, her temper getting the best of her. Naruto didn't say another word. He just did what his mother asked and headed up the stairs to his room. His siblings looked on at the scene with either a confused or a sad look on their face. Don't misunderstand, Kushina and Minato didn't hate Naruto, but they had seen much during their careers as shinobi and had committed unspeakable acts as well. They wanted to have at least one child spared from that fate, or at the very least, they wanted to let one of their children to enjoy their childhood, instead of forcing them to train every day. Unknown to them through these beliefs that had already started to push him away from their perfect little family, and it would eventually come back to haunt them. Flashback end. Naruto walked down the stairs and saw that his family had finished their training and were getting ready for lunch in the kitchen. He sighed, hoping they wouldn't ask where he was going. He walked through the kitchen with them, ignoring his very presence. His brother and sisters were dead tired, their form completely slumped over the kitchen table. His mother was the only other one in the room. She was facing the counter, preparing some sandwiches for his siblings after their long day of training. He took this as the perfect opportunity to take his leave. He rushed to the front door. Mom, I'm going over to Hannah's. And with that, he left. Kushina looked up surprised. What? Who was that? I could have sworn I heard someone's voice just now. She looked over confused to see 3 of her children resting their tired forms on the kitchen table. I feel like I'm forgetting something, or maybe someone. She decided to dismiss that thought for now and went back to preparing lunch. Naruto stood in a secluded clearing not too far away from the Uchiha compound. He liked this place because it was quite the distance away from the other compounds, the park, and the heart of the village. Really, it was quite a ways away from everything, so it was unlikely that anyone from his family would catch him training, let alone anyone in general. This was one of his more favored areas to train in. For what I saw, Kasen used her chakra to walk up a tree. This is probably the tree walking exercise I read about in Tucson study. From what I could gather, I need to figure out the necessary amount of chakra required. Too much chakra, and I'll be blown off. Too little chakra, and I won't stick to the tree surface. He looked at the tree, determination shining in his eyes, and drew a kunai out of his weapon's pouch to mark his progress. He began gathering chakra at his feet and sprinted towards the tree. A teenager of about 18 years of age had been sitting high in a tree above the clearing watching our young blonde making astounding progress with tree walking. He had untamed, wild, and somewhat curly black hair. He wore a black long-sleeve shirt that was common among Konoha shinobi attire and a dark green Jonin's vest. His hataye was tied around his forehead, spiking up his hair even more. He had been walking back to the Uchiha compound from another successful mission and decided to make a detour when he heard the sound of footsteps, a kunai slashing through something and panting. He decided to satisfy his curiosity and shined into a tree in the clearing once he saw the boy. From what he could see, the boy had only just started tree walking today and was almost halfway up the tree. The panting boy seemed familiar for some reason, so he decided to watch for a while. That is exactly when the boy ran past his other marks and made it halfway up. That is when he saw the boy slip. Wait. Blonde hair, and with that haircut. Isn't that the Yondame's son? I have to hurry. Little did he know the boy didn't slip, nor was he out of chakra. As soon as he started to move, he sensed a barrage of shuriken coming his way and had to shin to the other side of the clearing. The boy reached the ground and pulled out a kunai from his weapon's pouch. Who are you and what are you here for? Because of the distance his family put between them and Naruto and his lack of interaction with children his age, he had become somewhat aloof and cynical. This isn't what I expected. He actually reminds me a bit of Itachi, the teenager thought. I didn't expect you to be able to sense me. How'd you do that anyway? He asked, genuinely curious. Naruto thought about what guy could possibly want. He noticed that he was a shinobi, so one thought crossed through his mind. Shit, did Tucson send him here to find me? Does he know about my training? He figured that he should just play along for now. I suppose I'm somewhat of a sensor. I was able to sense you the moment you arrived in this clearing. I answered your question. Now it's your turn to answer mine. Naruto replied in a cold yet demanding tone. Yep, definitely reminds me of Itachi. Teenager mused to himself as he activated his Sharingan and smirked. You're Naruto, right? The name Shursui Kid, Uchiha Shursui. I was on the way back to the Uchiha compound when I saw you training. Why are you out here anyway? Shouldn't kids your age be at the academy? Shursui noticed that his emotionless look turned into a scowl. I'm not enrolled in the academy, and I won't be given a chance to for 3 more years. The raven-haired teenager's curious was immediately replaced with one of confusion after he had processed the information and tried to come to a conclusion based on that statement. Why is that? Most children from clans join the Shinobi Academy after they turn 9 years old. That is, unless they are specifically being groomed and trained for the duty of the clan heir. Naruto let out a dry chuckle that sent a shiver down Shursue's spine for some unknown reason. I assure you that isn't the case. In fact, the title of clan heir will most likely be given to one of my siblings once they turn my age, and that is also the reason I'm not in the academy yet. After a moment of silence, Shursui was about to speak before Naruto raised his hand up. You know the circumstances dealing with the ceiling, correct? Shursui nodded. Demonic chakra can take years to fully assimilate itself into a Jinchuriki's body. That's why they tend to be a few years older than they look. That is also the case with my siblings. While we may only be born a few minutes apart, in reality, they're close to 3 years younger than me. For some reason, my parents decided to keep us together, so I can't attend the academy until I turn 12. So, why aren't your parents supervising your children until then? Surely they can't expect you to sit around and do nothing for 3 more years. Shursui noticed that Naruto had a deadpanned look on his face as opposed to his angry one he had a minute ago. Naruto sighed as he began his story from the very beginning. Naruto and Shursui were staring off into the distance at the setting sun as Naruto's tale was coming to a close, and that is what's written so far in my story. I'm out here because my parents have refused to train me or even acknowledge my existence. I don't want to sit back in the warmth of the Uzumaki Namikaze's estate while everybody moves forwards with their lives. I want to prove to myself that my existence is worth something, that it was good that I was born. Naruto looked over to Shursui and noticed he had tears flowing down his face. Stop crying. I didn't mean for this to sound like some sob story. You're a grown man for Cammy's sake. And get off of me, damn it, he yelled as Shursui clung to him. Sorry, kid. Asterisk sniff asterisk. It's just that. Asterisk sniff asterisk. Our life stories are pretty similar. Shursui managed to get out while wiping the tears from his eyes. How so? Shursui sighed and turned back towards the sunset. You ever heard of someone named Uchiha Itachi? Naruto looked at him confused, but nodded. He's my best friend, but he's also some kind of prodigy that the Uchiha clan hasn't produced since the era of warring states. Even though I'm stronger than Itachi, I'm a different kind of genius. I'm a genius of hard work, as Mato Guy would put it. I've worked my ass off since before I was your age, kid, and still I'm always compared to Itachi. Even my own parents told me that they wish that they had Itachi as a son instead of me. Trust me, I get where you're coming from. Naruto let out a small on that nobody has seen for a long time. From what I saw today, I can tell that you have the potential to be both Naruto. Naruto looked shocked. This was the first time all day that Shursui had called him his name. It was the first time that somebody had genuinely him like they cared for him. Shursui noticed the tears in Naruto's eyes that he refused to show. Itachi has a little sister too. She's about the age of your siblings, I think, and he's already started training her too. What do you say, Naruto? Will you become my student? That was the final dam. The tears started pouring out of his eyes. Asterisk sniff, asterisk. Yishus sensei. The will of fire still burns. 2.5 years. 2.5 years, that is how long it had been since Shursui had taken Naruto on as a student. It had gone by in the blink of an eye, and yet so many things had changed for him during that time. One of the things that changed was that he was actually training to be a shinobi. Serious training, not those children's training regimens that Minato and Kushina had his siblings on, or even those taijutsu classes at the academy that he had seen a few times. No, he was going through training routines that would make Mato Guy break a sweat. What do you expect? Shursui was currently one of the top shinobi in Konoha, right beside Hatake Kakashi, Mato Guy, and Uchiha Itachi. His daily routine was to wake up at 5 a.m. before anybody at the estate was awake, eat a small breakfast, and head to the Uchiha compound to meet up with Shursui. From there, they would head out of Konoha, and Naruto would be given the task of running at least 10 laps around the village. After which, they would head to the clearing where they met for the first time for taijutsu training. If you remember, Naruto's eyes aren't exactly normal. They aren't any kind of Kekiai Genkai, but when he was born, the Kyuubi's chakra fused with them, granting him with exceptional eyesight. Shursui once referred to them as the eyes of a hawk because they can track even high-speed movements. These unique abilities are quite similar to the Sharingan's ability to read and predict movement. It is because of this that Shursui was able to start teaching Naruto the Uchiha's Interceptor Fist style of taijutsu, which he excelled at. Naruto shivered as he remembered all those taijutsu spars he had with Shursui, which were actually more like beatdowns than anything. They usually ended their taijutsu training at around lunchtime, so they would usually take a break and grab a bite to eat. They would either head to the Uchiha compound to grab some homemade food, or they would head into the village and stop at a sushi bar that Naruto had taken a liking to. They stopped at Ichiraku's once for ramen, and ironically enough, he wasn't very fond of the stuff. After lunch, they would head back to the clearing for either ninjutsu or jinjutsu training. They would switch off between the two every week. He usually returned to the Uzumaki Namikaze's estate close to 7 p.m., where he ate dinner and headed up to his room to either study or meditate. On days when Shursui had missions, Naruto would usually practice his Bukijutsu instead of ninjutsu or jinjutsu, and he would practice his taijutsu katas in the morning instead of sparring. He had never been very interested in weapons, so Kenjutsu was immediately dropped from their training regimen after he had learned the basics. He even disliked using shuriken and kunai, but they were essentials for every shinobi. He started on Bukijutsu early so that he could move on to other aspects of his training. He had become so accurate with his kunai and shuriken that they could rival most jounin. Ninjutsu and Jinjutsu were Naruto's two favorite shinobi arts. Ninjutsu, because there were so many different types of jutsu, and how most of the figures that were known all throughout history. Due to his sensei's specialty, one of the first things Naruto was taught was the Shunshin. Not just any kind of Shushin, Shursui's specialized one, where he just vanishes in a flash, not so different from the Hiraishin. He loved Jinjutsu because the possibilities were almost limitless. Over the years, the blonde had become a bit sadistic and enjoyed the idea of torturing a person's mind. For various reasons, he excelled in these two areas of the shinobi art specifically. The second thing that changed was his relationships with people outside of his family. He has always been rude and untrusting towards people who want to be his friends, especially when he would be at the park with his siblings or even on his own. It wasn't hard to tell that many of the village's children wanted to befriend him just so that they could get closer to the village's saviors. That was a main reason why he didn't attempt to get close to outsiders. Before he met Shursui, he did make one friend, Inuzuka Hana, the former heiress of the Inuzuka clan. Former heiress was the key word there because she has a younger brother, Inuzuka Kiba, who happened to be friends with the three younger Uzumaki Namikazes. The fact that their siblings were friends and that they were in the same boat when it came to family relations was what gave them the chance to connect with each other and become good friends. In a family dominated by alpha males, females are often looked over by their family to raise the perfect leader of a pack. Hana's mother, Inuzuka Tsum, also wanted to keep her and her brother together since they were only 2 years apart from each other. Therefore, Hana wouldn't be enrolled into the Shinobi Academy either, or at least until Kiba turned 9 years old. This didn't mean that she was neglected as much as Naruto was, but it was enough for him to open up to her. After that, they were often seen together around the village or at the Inuzuka compound. Besides her, he still is pretty much the same way with people, but that didn't stop him from making a handful of friends, even if he wanted to. Flashback 2 years ago. Uchiha compound. Naruto and Shursui were walking through the Uchiha district heading towards the Uchiha library. The young blonde gave his sensei a questioning look. I know you're an Uchiha. That much is obvious, but I'm pretty sure their jutsu library was made by Uchiha for Uchiha. I don't think that they would take too kindly to an outsider learning all of their jutsu. And as much as I hate to say it, me being the son of the current Hokage doesn't exactly help my case. Shursui looked down and gave him a smirk. As one of the top shinobi of the Konoha and the Uchiha clan, I'm granted certain rights that normal Uchiha clan members don't have, such as being able to teach whatever I want to my apprentice and bring them to the Uchiha library. It doesn't matter if they're Uchiha or not. Plus, me being on the fast track to becoming an ENBU helps too. And besides, you've been training nonstop from dawn till dusk since we started your training 6 months ago. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. The breeze feels great. If you don't stop and take a look around you every once in a while, you just might miss all of the little things in life. Life isn't all about training, you know, kid. He was expecting some kind, angry outburst or death glare that he was so used to by now. So he was surprised when Naruto stopped mid-step deep in thought. You know, Sensei, now that I think about it, I guess I do feel a bit burned out by the amount of training you've been putting me through. He began looking up and down the streets of the Uchiha district as if expecting something, and I think I already like the Uchiha district better than being in the village. No villagers bowing to me wherever I go. Nobody hasn't tried to kiss my ass yet. No one is trying to give me free handouts. This place just feels right. Perhaps we could take the rest of the day off from training. Shursui beamed at him. Of course you weren't really going to give me a choice in the matter, were you? Naruto asked in a demanding tone. Shursui rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. The truth is, I also wanted you to meet some good people. I know how you are and what you think of people, but you should have some friends that you could depend on other than me and Hana. Naruto scowled a bit at the mention of friends, but decided to think about it a bit instead of lashing out. He sighed, I guess if you trust them, then I could at least give them a chance. Shursui sighed in relief. But before he could say anything, he was cut off. Hey, wait a minute. Weren't we supposed to keep you training me a secret? I haven't told them anything yet. I just decide this now. And besides, we only decided not to tell your family so that they wouldn't be able to stop you from training. By the way, have things gotten any better between you and them? Naruto just sighed in frustration. No, in fact, they've gotten worse now that the training has gone to Nawaki's, not Suki's and Narumi's heads. They act like a bunch of spoiled brats that make me want to use my strongest Katan jutsu just to set the mansion on fire and hope they burn inside. Shursui sweat dropped at the evil smirk on his face. Maybe you should stay at my place tonight? Naruto just nodded. The rest of the trip to the library was spent in silence. They made it into the library with only a little hassle, After explaining their relationship to each other, they were allowed to pass. Naruto ended up picking up a few Katan jutsus that were favored by Madara Uchiha and some more intricate scrolls on Jinjutsu. Shursui had tested Naruto's elemental affinity about 2 months ago and was surprised by the results. After giving him the piece of chakra paper and telling him to concentrate chakra into it, the paper split in half. One of the halves became damp, and the other half caught on fire and didn't just turn to ash, but turned into a miniature fireball before disintegrating. Both of them had wide eyes and agreed to train his fire affinity first, seeing as it was the strongest, which was strange because neither of his parents had a fire affinity. Soon after, they left the library seeing as they has gotten the more advanced Katan jutsus that they were looking for. Naruto just let Shursui guide him to his desired location. After a good 10 minutes of walking, they finally arrived at what Naruto could guess was the house of the clan head's family. Shursui led him inside, and after taking off their shinobi sandals, they proceeded further into the house. He was then greeted with a sight that he could only describe as a perfect, happy family. The first person he saw was a beautiful woman with silky black hair and a perfect heart-shaped face. She wore an apron over her gray long-sleeved shirt with the Uchiha crest on the back and a pink skirt. She was in the kitchen making lunch while her 2 children sat on the couch. One of them was a teenager, close to Shursui's age and height, with black hair that formed 2 bangs which framed his face and a ponytail in the back. He had black eyes and wore a high-collared blue shirt with black shinobi pants. This must be Shursui's friend Itachi. The one that really stood out to him was the girl sitting on her brother's lap, trying to read a scroll about chakra with a confused look on her face. She had long black hair that reached down to her back and covered her right eye and had pale skin that reminded him of snow. She wore a pure white kimono with an Uchiha crest on the back. She looked about 6 years old, and this must be his little sister, Satsuki, that Shursui told me about. Hello, everyone. Naruto heard Shursui call out before he was smacked in the head with a wooden spoon. How many times have I told you not to yell in the house, Shursukun? The woman yelled. Well, you really have hit me with that damned spoon, Mikoto-san. Mikoto just smiled. I wouldn't if you would listen for once. Naruto smirked at his sensei being scolded like a child. And who might this be? Itachi and his sister looked up, now paying attention to the other new arrival. Yes, that's the reason we're here. This is my apprentice Naruto. Itachi chose this time to move off of the couch and speak up. Apprentice? When did you take on an apprentice? Did Hokage-sama assign you one? No offense, but you really don't seem like teaching material. Shursui puffed his cheeks out like a child. Oi, I'll have you know I'm a great sensei. Right, Naruto? Naruto. Shursui looked over to where Naruto was and noticed that Satsuki had gotten up from her seat on the couch and was now playing with Naruto's hair. He noticed Naruto's twitching eyebrow and burst into laughter. Naruto gave him a dark glare. I will kill you slowly and painfully, Shursui. Yeah. Anyway, it looks like she's taken a real liking to you. Kami knows why the little devil girl hates me. Satsuki stopped playing with Naruto's hair to respond to Shursui. I'm not a devil girl. I just don't like you 'cause you're stupid, she yelled, after which she kicked him in the groin to stop his laughing. After he got off the floor and recovered from the pain, he spoke again. Anyway, I brought him here to meet all of you. Besides me and Inuzuka Hana, he doesn't really have any friends. Makoto and Itachi both look surprised, but Itachi is the one who responded, "What do you mean, Shursui? Isn't he Hokage-sama's son? I would think that being the son of the Hokage would make plenty of children want to be his friend." Naruto looked at Shursui, who nodded. About that." Naruto then proceeded to tell all of them his story, the same one that he told Shursui 6 months ago. Itachi and Makoto both looked shocked, and Satsuki just looked confused. Makoto decided to speak. Is all of that true? Minato and Kushina-chan don't even treat you like a son anymore. Naruto just nodded and looked up to see Makoto's angry face after she stood up. "Then I'm going over to their compound right now to have a talk with them." Shursui was about to restrain her, but it was then that Naruto calmly spoke. "Please don't, Makoto-sama. I would prefer if you left them alone. I want to see for myself if they will begin to understand what they're doing to me. If they're just so overwhelmed with their other 3 children that they continue to push me away, even after all of my efforts to become closer to them, or they just don't want to take the time to even think about me. Whatever the outcome, I don't want it to be altered by anyone from the outside. Please understand." Makoto froze at his reasoning. What kind of child could possibly think like this? The risks for his relationship to turn out badly is too great, but every decision has consequences, and I guess this will be theirs. After a minute, Makoto moved towards him and engulfed him in a motherly hug. "If they don't show you any love or affection, then we will. You can be part of our little family. Okay." Naruto just nodded with tears in his eyes and returned Makoto's hug. Itachi got up, put a hand on Naruto's shoulder, and smiled at him. Satsuki looked happy at what was going on, only understanding half of it. "Do I have a new Inai-san, Ka-chan?" Everybody started laughing at that, even Naruto. Shursui was watching the whole scene with a smirk on his face, succeeding in what he came here to do. Flashback end. Uzumaki Namikaze's compound. Naruto had just woken up from his room in the Uzumaki Namikaze compound. It needed to be specified because over the last 2.5 years, Naruto has spent most of his time at the Uchiha compound, sometimes even going as far as eating dinner and staying the night in Satsuki's room. They are not in an intimate relationship in any sense of the word, but over the past few years, she had grown rather attached to her Naruto and Naruto had grown to see her as more of a sister than his actual blood-related family. Speaking of family, they had grown even further apart over the last few years. Both Natsuki and Nawaki had both gone into one-tailed states before and lost control of themselves, destroying most of the training ground they were at in the process. That only resulted in their parents paying even closer attention to them, and not just during training. No, even during family outing, when all 6 of them went into the village, everything was always about Nawaki, Natsuki, and Narumi. How they wanted new training equipment, or wanted a new toy, or even what flavor ramen they wanted, completely disregarding Naruto's requests or objections. They didn't even know that ramen was one of the blonde's least favorite foods. Naruto leisurely got out of bed and got dressed. After all, it was his day off from training. He opened his bedroom door and walked downstairs. Naruto noticed that it was about 9 a.m., so his family should be finishing up breakfast and leaving for their morning training. It was these observations that brought him back to his thoughts on his family. The first was his father. He almost never had any contact with Minato anymore. Naruto usually left the house early in the morning to spend the day at a friend's house, or at least that's what he told his parents when asked. And Minato spent most of the time either training Naruto's siblings or at the Hokage Tower doing his usual duties. Naruto usually saw him at dinner, but he usually just talked to Kushina or his other three children how their training went. His thoughts then drifted to Kushina. The situation with her was pretty much identical to Minato's. Although because of her highly annoying temper, in Naruto's opinion, she often scolded him for being late or for missing dinner. This often ended with her asking Naruto why he couldn't be a perfect child like his siblings. This normally should have left a pain in his chest, but he stopped caring about such childish remarks from them a long time ago. The next was Nawaki. Now, this little cockroach was someone Naruto could say he truly hated. He started off as a sweet little kid, but after years of his parents spoiling him and giving him everything he could ever ask for, he believed that he could do no wrong and became spoiled to the core. He believed that he was Kami's gift to world, not to mention his superiority and god complexes. And Tsunade doting on him every chance she got didn't help. Due to this, he became lazy and expecting everything to hand it to him. Tsunade completely adored Nawaki and even gave him extra training. This was all because Minato and Kushina decided to name him after a brother who died during the Third Great Shinobi War. Speaking of Tsunade, Naruto had not once even spoken to her. Next was Narumi. She often bragged about how she was getting training and Naruto wasn't. She believed that she was better than everybody else just because she was a Jinchuriki. The foolish girl had no idea how Jinchuriki are usually treated. Narumi was a daddy's girl believing that he could do no wrong, and that's why she thought of Naruto as the loser of the family, because he was the only one not being trained. Natsuki was an odd case. She used to be a little brat, but now she just seemed indifferent to him. She had some kind of high and mighty holier-than-thou personality, which he found annoying, but at certain times he could believe that she cared for him. "Oh, Naruto, you're usually gone by this time." It was this voice that broke him out of his thoughts. The rest of his family was standing by the door, getting ready to go to one of the training fields. It was Kushina who had spoken to him. Naruto looked at Kushina and then headed towards the refrigerator. "I had nothing to do today, so I thought I'd sleep in for a bit. He's been awfully cold to us lately. Perhaps if we let him join training today, he'll smile a bit." Kushina thought, "Naruto, why don't you join us for training today?" The whole room went silent. Everyone had different thoughts. Did she really just say that? After 2.5 fucking years, she asks if I want to join training for the day. How would a joke? What's your game, Kushina? Why should someone like me have to even share a train ing ground with pathetic trash like him? Were Nawaki's thoughts. Narumi's hands clenched in a fist. I thought he was supposed to be some loser who wasn't even supposed to be a shinobi, and now you want him to train with us, Kachan. Natsuki's emotionless face cracked a small smile. Oni-sama is finally going to train with us. It has been so long since I've been able to spend time with him. Maybe Kachan and Tusan will even let me spar with him. It was Minato who decided to voice his thoughts. Are you sure, Kushina? I mean, Naruto hasn't had much training before, and we need to concentrate on the others in case that they lose control of the Kyuubi's chakra. Kushina had a thoughtful look on her face for a minute. We should at least let him spar with one of them to show him what he'll be up against when he starts the academy in 6 months with his siblings. Naruto gained a tick mark on his forehead. You're the ones who refuse to teach me anything and forbid me from training until the academy. And besides, I have been training. I've even defeated a few Chunin from the Uchiha clan in sparring matches. Minato was silent for a few seconds. Okay, how about we let him spar with Natsuki? Natsuki had a happy look on her face. Yes, 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 yes. Naruto could only groan, seeing as there was no way out of it. After his breakfast, they all headed out the door to one of the larger training grounds closer to the compound walls. Once they got there, Naruto and Natsuki moved toward the center, about 15 feet apart from each other, as everybody else moved towards the side. Minato decided to set the rules for the match. This will be a straight taijutsu match. There will be no use of ninjutsu or jinjutsu under any circumstances. The match will end when I call it or when either one of you are unable to continue. Do you understand? They both nodded. Natsuki took this chance to speak. Nissen, I'll use this chance to show you the difference between the two of us, to show you how strong you need to become. Naruto just scoffed at her arrogance. Begin. Natsuki rushed forward as fast as she could, hoping to end the fight quickly so that she wouldn't have to hurt her Oni-sama too much. Naruto used this chance to get into his interceptor fist stance. With her straightforward approach, she pulled her fist back and swung at Naruto, who sidestepped, causing her to stumble with a lack of contact. As she lost her balance, he swept Natsuki's legs out from under her, causing her to fall back. Naruto followed up with an axe kick to the gut, causing her to cough out some saliva and some of the ground to break in a spiderweb pattern. He jumped back as she got off of the ground and wiped the saliva from her mouth. Naruto felt how angry she was through her sensor abilities and how much chakra she was letting run wild. He steadied himself. Natsuki rushed towards her brother with newfound speed and appeared right before him. She sent a backhand towards his head, which he ducked under, and retaliated with an elbow to the solar plexus, causing her to lose her breath. Naruto then connected with her chin with a fierce uppercut, after which she flew into the air. Naruto wasn't done yet. He grabbed her leg as it was in midair and threw her into the ground. Hard. He was expecting her to get up or for his father to call the match before things got out of hand, but he was too late. As soon as Naruto turned to look at his father, his was hit with a huge wave of malicious killing intent. He looked over to where his sister had landed and saw exactly what he didn't want to. Natsuki's violet eyes turned red with a black slit through them. Her fangs elongated and her perfectly kept nails had turned into claws. And the worst part of all of this was that there was a crimson cloak of chakra surrounding her body, sprouting 2 fox-like tails. Just then the third tail emerged. Fuck me. That was all it took to bring out 3 tails worth of the Kyuubi's chakra. Has she never taken a few punches before? Before Minato of Kushina could even move to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra, she disappeared in a flash of pure speed and reappeared right in front of Naruto. He barely even had time to move before she stabbed him right above the eye with one of her claws and dragged it down the length of his face, which sent him stumbling back. She jumped forward, grabbing his body. One of her claws wrapped around his right hand, with the other grabbing his right calf. The sinister chakra started eating away at his flesh within milliseconds of her touching it. As quick as Natsuki grabbed him, she threw him into the ground, the impact creating a small crater. She rushed towards the middle where he was and hazed on of her claws. Her aim was to cut him in half vertically, but Naruto managed to move his body to the left a little, causing her to miss, and instead slash through almost the entire right side of his body from shoulder to his abdomen. It was then that chakra chains erupted from the ground, restraining all of her limbs, as Minato appeared in front of her and attached a pre-written seal on her forehead. The Kyuubi's chakra receded and she fell to the ground, unconscious. Then Minato looked down at his son's body and his eyes widened. Naruto's right side of his face was covered in blood with a jagged slash mark through his right eye. The flesh surrounding his hand and calf were completely burned off, and the wound that really worried him was the largest one. The right side of his torso was almost completely severed from the rest of his body. The time from when Natsuki sprouted her third tail to when her chakra was suppressed was about the span of 6 seconds. There were small patches of flames on the injured parts of his body that looked like they were trying to heal him somehow, which made Minato curious. But he looked up and saw his son gushing out of his body and slowly started to drown, and it made Minato forget that thought. He heard Naruto groaned and grabbed him and Natsuki before flashing to the hospital, leaving his wife with a horror-stricken face while his other son and daughter emptied their stomachs onto the training ground with the sight of their brother and the amount of blood. Konoha Hospital. After seeing the condition that Naruto was in, he was immediately rushed to the emergency room to be operated on by Tsunade. He may not have liked the woman much, but she was a damn good doctor. With the condition Naruto was in, he should have been unconscious due to the amount of blood loss, but he had been awake for the last 3 hours. He was even awake when Minato dropped him off at the front desk, and he was taken away on a stretcher while his father went with another nurse to take Natsuki to another hospital room. I can't blame him this time, I suppose. He's, probably checking to make sure the seal is still holding up. Naruto now understood a little bit better why his parents were so focused on his siblings, but then his face contorted with rage. But I almost just died. Probably already finished checking up on her. The least that they could do is be here for me. Just because I understand doesn't mean that I have to forgive. With those thoughts, he drifted into unconsciousness. The will of fire still burns. Reincarnation and prophecies. Hokage Tower. It was a beautiful day in Kanehagakure no Sato. After all, they were living at a time of peace. Every day was beautiful. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and there was a relaxing breeze that just made you want to take a nap under one of the bountiful trees that Konoha was so famous for. It was almost like any other day in the village, almost. Namake's Minato was not having a good day. Everything had just started out with a simple spar. The first thing that had gone wrong was that Kushina had asked Naruto if he wanted to train with them for the day. Of course, Minato was against it at the time, but if he had voiced his opinion, would have probably been on the under end of Kushina's temper and most likely a beating. The next was that Naruto was actually winning the spar when they hadn't trained him while their daughter, who had gone through daily training for the past 3 years, couldn't even touch him. That brought up more questions. How could he be so advanced in taijutsu already? Has he been training all this time? No. Naruto isn't smart enough to know how to train on his own properly. He probably just picked up a few things from watching his friends. Minato thought for a minute. Who were his friends again? Well, that's right, he usually spends time with Inuzuka, Kiba's older sister. But it looked like he was using the Uchiha's Interceptor Fist. Fugako has a younger daughter, doesn't he? Perhaps Naruto is friends with her. Yes, that has to be it. His thoughts on Naruto ended there and were brought back to his daughter. This had been the second time that she had lost control in the past 6 months. In reality, none of his children were even relatively close to being able to control or even use the Kyuubi's chakra without going berserk and trying to destroy anything in their paths. They had been training their children to try and control the Biju, but it looked as if that were never going to happen since none of them inherited their mother's chakra chains yet. What went wrong? It was just a taijutsu spar. She shouldn't have even been using churka, let alone the Kyuubis. Do they need more training? They can't lose control of themselves every time they take a few punches. I knew we shouldn't have let Naruto train with his siblings. We needed to be focusing solely on the others so that situations like this don't happen. He couldn't help but remember the scolding he got from Kushina when she arrived at the hospital, and he couldn't even tell her what condition Naruto was in because he was checking on Natsuki's seal. Kushina understood why Minato was checking the seal instead of getting information about their son's condition, but that didn't mean she couldn't be upset with him. After all, their son almost died because their daughter gave in to her negative emotions. That only solidified the fact that they should be entirely focused on training their children to withstand the Kyuubi so that they don't hurt anyone they care about again. And this time it was far more serious than the others when they just destroyed the training grounds before they were restrained. No, this time one of them had almost killed their brother. Not to mention the fact that this was the farthest that any of them had gone with the Kyuubi's chakra. 3 tails. 3 fucking tails. That's only 1 tail before the Kyuubi will start taking over your body and the chakra starts eating away at your skin. We can't ever let this ever happen again. It is far too dangerous. The entire village could feel the malicious chakra of the Kyuubi, and they were in mass panic. It was nowhere near the oppressing terror that so many had felt that night over 11 years ago, but it was enough for people to immediately recognize the chakra. Minato had to publicly announce what happened, minus the part about Natsuki going berserk, and tell them that everything was under control and the situation was taken care of. Some were still weary, but went on with their daily lives nonetheless. The only people who knew the truth about what happened were the Uzumaki Namikaze's family, Tsunade, Kakashi, and a handful of AMBU. Oh, dealing with the council was a load of fun for him. He had to make up some kind of lie that they had an accident when dealing with the Kyuubi's chakra. Of course, Danzo made a point to ask for him to train the children, which Minato immediately refused. Minato then remembered what Tsunade had told him just a few hours ago after his conversation with Kushina and dealing with the village and the council. Flashback morning. Minato had just finished dealing with the council when Tsunade called him back to the hospital to inform him about his children's condition. Tsunade, how is Natsuki? She didn't suffer any repercussions from using the Kyuubi's chakra, did she? His mind had been on Natsuki all morning due to having to check the seal, thinking about her going into a 3-tailed state, and later having to talk to the village and council about her, so he was immediately concerned about her well-being. Tsunade just raised an eyebrow, but answered him nonetheless, Natsuki is fine. She is suffering from chakra exhaustion and torn muscles from overexerting herself in her cubified state, but otherwise she's fine. Though she should probably spend the night in the hospital just to be on the safe side. Minato let out a sigh of relief. He was worried that if too much of the Kyuubi's chakra got into her chakra coils at one time, then it would start eating away at her chakra network. He was glad that wasn't the case. Tsunade raised the clipboard that she had in her hand up so that she could read it. Naruto, on the other hand, Minato's face instantly paled as he remembered the state that his son was in and cursed himself for forgetting how serious his wounds looked. Naruto's situation is far worse than it looked. The operation was a success, and we managed to stabilize him, but not all of his wounds could be solved with medical ninjutsu alone. The entire right half from trapezius to mid-abdomen was almost completely cleaved through. We managed to repair all of his organs, internal damage, and even close the wound. He'll need immense physical therapy before he's even able to use his right side again, unless some kind of miracle happens. Next up, those burns he received. When Natsuki grabbed his right hand and right calf, the Kyuubi's chakra immediately started devouring his flesh. Had you not gotten him here, when you did, it would have started invading and eating through his chakra network. There was nothing we could do about these specific wounds besides extracting the demonic chakra from them. It's likely that the skin on his right hand, till about an inch above his wrist, will never fully heal. The wound had pretty much already cauterized itself before you got him here. The same could be said about the burn on his calf. The only difference is that it is in the shape of a claw mark. His final wound was the slash to his eye. This wound was specifically difficult to operate on. When Natsuki's claws slashed straight through his eyeball. Normally, we would have been able to repair something like that, but with the amount of Kyuubi chakra eating away at it, we needed to remove it all together in order to repair his nerves. Minato was speechless at the amount of damage that was done to his son's body. He gulped. Will he be able to recover? Is he awake yet? Theoretically, he should be able to make a full recovery when he wakes up, but there lies the problem. He's in a coma. We don't know when he will wake up, or even if he will wake up. A look of shock was evident on Minato's face. He didn't even ponder the possibility that Tsunade wouldn't be able to solve all of the young Hokage's problems and that they wouldn't walk out of the hospital one big happy family, or at least in Minato's mind. Little did he know what was going on in Naruto's mind as they spoke. Flashback end. Naruto's mindscape. What the hell is going on? The last thing that Naruto remembered was being operated on in the hospital, losing consciousness, and then flames. An enormous amount of flames, then feeling dizzy and waking up in this war-ridden wasteland in a body that wasn't his own. It felt like he was seeing everything from the perspective of another person. He would do everything that that person did. It would feel as if it were himself talking as this person spoke. He could even hear this person's thoughts. From what he could gather, he was in a different time period within his own mind. A time long before the formation of the hidden villages, or even before the time of the era of warring states. This was long before then. This was an era when only 3 people could wield chakra. The first was this man's mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya. The second was his brother Otsutsuki Hagoromo, and the third was his other brother, Otsutsuki Himura. The man's body that he was trapped in was known as Otsutsuki Ace and was the only one of Kagaya's sons born without the body to wield chakra. From what Naruto could understand from the thoughts of Ace and the conversations he had, Kagaya was the progenitor of chakra. They gained this ability by eating a strange fruit that she had picked from the Shinju tree. Naruto found it strange that a fruit was the cause of chakra that every person possessed in his time, but quickly became used to the idea as he had seen stranger things happen. It was that Ace got up and looked in the mirror. What Naruto saw surprised him greatly. Ace's reflection looked like an older version of his own. The first thing that Naruto's noticed were freckles in the same area as Naruto's, on his cheeks in small clumps just under his eyes. Naruto had always found them childish. It was odd. Nobody in his family had freckles, and yet somehow he had to have inherited them from somewhere. The next thing he noticed were his eyes. They were the same shade of coal gray. This wasn't too surprising, as it wasn't exactly a rare color. But it was odd. Ace's mother had the Byakugan and the Rinnegan. So did his brother. While his other brother had the Rinnegan. Even if Ace didn't possess chakra, he should have at least inherited an inactive Byakugan or something. Then he saw his hair. Ace had naturally parted pitch black hair that framed his face and refused to cover his forehead. It was coarse and wave and fell down to the bottom of his neck and the back. It was reminiscent of Naruto's own hairstyle when he didn't purposely spike it up into his father's hairstyle. Naruto's face was more angular, though, similar to his father. Ace wore knee-length black shorts with an orange eyelet-studded belt and a button-up pale yellow shirt. He also wore an orange cowboy hat with two smileys, a smiling and a frowning face that were connected by red beads. Two long side STRPS came down from his hat and met at a medallion of a bull skull on his chest. He wore a red beaded necklace around his neck. His attire was far different from the dress of the other Otsutsukis, who usually wore traditional robes. Ace, of course, had his trademark tattoos. The first vertically red ASC with the S crossed out on his left bicep. He got this one in memory of his best friend, Sabo, who died after standing up against Kagaya, telling her that she was abusing her power and should use it to help bring peace towards the world. He was killed by her not long after, but news of his actions had already reached the ears of many and started a rebellion. The second was a purple skull with crossbones shaped in a cross-like pattern behind it. The skull had white eyes and a large crescent-shaped mustache. This was a tribute to his father, Otsutsuki Edward. He was the first person to ever show Ace that someone was happy that he was born. They were similar in more than just appearance as well. Ace was more intelligent than even his brothers and was rather polite when the situation called for it. But out of those times, he was often rude and aloof, especially to people who tried to order him around or demand something from him. However, he was always in the shadow of his mother and even his brothers. Ace's mother was the ruler of this era and was often referred to as the rabbit goddess for bringing peace to the world with her unrivaled power. However, after she gave birth to triplets, her power began to cloud her judgment and soon resorted to trying to control mankind by force, and people began to see her as a demon rather than a benevolent goddess. Because of what his mother was becoming, he often questioned his own right to exist. He believed that, with what his mother was doing and how she ruled over humans like a tyrant, if he were to die, nobody in the world would care, as nobody wanted the son of the devil to live. He never sought after true peace like Hagoromo did, or to lead his clan towards a better future like Himura did. No, all he ever sought after was the answer to his lifelong question of whether he had truly been born. Ace never really cared about world peace or anything like that. This was too much of a naive dream for someone like him. He knew that any kind of peace wouldn't last, and that there would be war with or without chakra for any reason that humans could possibly think of. Ace may not have believed in peace, but there were a few things that he did believe in. Freedom and family. He would do whatever it took to help his brothers achieve their dreams. That is what family is for, right? And Kagaya was a tyrant who was slowly taking freedom away from the people of the world. These were two things that Ace would willingly fight and die for. He knew that Kagaya that was close to finding them, but he was going somewhere where he knew that he would find answers, the Shinju tree, where his mother attained this power. He had read a legend recently that only once every millennium would the tree bear a true chakra fruit. However, this legend also stated that 2 decades after the first chakra fruit would be eaten, 5 more would be formed, though these 5 wouldn't be as strong or as versatile. The 5 fruits each contained a specific element, and once eaten could even give the user the power to turn into that element. Only one person would be able to eat each fruit, though. The fruits were supposed to make the user intangible, which would make any person seem like they were invincible. But he knew that wouldn't be enough to stop his mother. He would need the help of others along with his brothers. He had finally made it to the tree and saw the 5 strange-looking fruits hanging from several different branches. She had always been extremely protective of that tree, so he had to hurry. She never wanted anyone to have that kind of power besides her. He climbed up it and reached for an orange fruit with flame-like markings covering the outside. He gulped and took a bite. Naruto watched vividly as Ace's entire life depicted the defeat and sealing of Otsutsuki Kagaya, the creation of the Bijou, how chakra was passed on to humans, how after going off on his own to travel, changed his name from Otsutsuki Ace to Porgasti Ace, and finally where Ace planned to have his chakra fruit reincarnate when he died. At Ace's eventual death, Naruto was ejected out of his mind. Naruto's hospital room, Natsuki POV. Natsuki was watching Naruto like she usually did whenever she had time. It had been 4 months since he had fell into a coma. Natsuki had felt so guilt-ridden all those months ago when she woke up and found out that she caused her brother so much pain and suffering. She cried for the better part of the day when she found out that he may never wake up. She had refused to even leave his room for a week. It was only when her parents had gotten on their knees and begged her to come home that she finally listened, though she'd just come back every day to visit him for hours on end. After spending so much time with him in the hospital room, she became even more attached. Natsuki had met a lot of the people that Naruto could say was his family. She had met Inuzuka Hana, Uchiha Makoto, Uchiha Itachi, Uchiha Shursui, and Uchiha Satsuki. She grew immediately jealous that her Oni Aisama knew girls besides her, and such pretty ones at that. The ones that came to visit the most were Satsuki, Hana, and Makoto. Itachi was an ANBU and Shursui, was always being sent on ANBU missions, and had his duties in the Uchiha police force as well. Kushina and Minato had only come to visit a handful of times, and that was either when they had come with Natsuki or when they came to drag her back home. They stopped coming after the first few weeks. Hana and her became friends after a few months, while Makoto didn't want anything to do with her at first because of how Naruto's family treated him. But Makoto decided to give the girl a chance, and they could now hold a civil conversation. Her and Satsuki did not get along at all, mostly because Satsuki had decided that Natsuki didn't deserve her Naruto and Ai's forgiveness or love. For anyone watching the two, they would just see a catfight between two little girls with huge brother complexes. Natsuki brought herself out of her thoughts and stared at the motionless form of her brother. She had a sad smile on her face. Oni-sama, I hope you wake up soon. Hokage Tower. Minato was sitting on his desk, finishing up all of the paperwork that had accumulated over the week due to spending so many hours training his children. They had really focused more on using the Kyuubi's chakra so that they wouldn't lose control should it ever try to take them over like what happened to Natsuki. Even Nawaki had actually trained a little more. A little. He was still lazy and refused to do much hard work, but it was better than nothing. Minato had noticed that Natsuki was getting even more depressed as the days went on. She still blamed herself for what happened to Naruto and would spend most of her time in his hospital room. At first, he was concerned with Nawaki's and Narumi's lack of concern about Naruto, but he later put off the thought, thinking that they were probably greatly disturbed with the amount of blood they saw and didn't want to see their brother in that condition. He was half right, their minds were scarred from the amount of blood, but they wouldn't ever really put any thought into Naruto's condition. He had been busy the last few months. He could barely make any time to spend with his children. Tensions were rising within Konoha, and if something wasn't done, it could spell the end of Konoha as he knew it. From the spies that he had in the Uchiha clan, he had found out that they were planning a coup d'etat. If they went through with it, could cause a civil war within Konoha, which would give other nations a chance to invade and overtake the village. It was the worst-case scenario. Minato knew he had to do something, but for now, he would be patient and see if they could come to a peaceful negotiation. The Uchiha were one of the founding clans of Konoha, but over the years they had lost power and influence. One of the causes was that night over 11 years ago when the Kyuubi escaped from its seal. There were many eyewitnesses who claimed that they had seen the design of the Sharingan eye in the eyes of the Kyuubi, suggesting that sometime after its escape, it was caught under the control of an Uchiha and used to cause mass destruction and death before it was resealed. If it really was the Uchiha who were responsible for that act of terrorism on the leaf, and they would be dealt with accordingly, but Minato's spies denied all knowledge of any Uchiha wielding an eye strong enough to control a Biju. The last person to be able to fully subdue a Biju with visual prowess alone was Madara Uchiha, and he was killed by the Shodaime Hokage after his betrayal. However, it cannot either be confirmed nor denied that the Kyuubi was being controlled, and yet the Uchiha slowly lost all of their political power and were segregated to the outskirts of Konoha. It didn't help the village's cause that every Hokage up to date has led the village according to the Senju's ideals. The Shodaime and Nidaime Hokages were both Senju by blood and helped to found the village and make it into what it is today. The Sandaime Hokage was the student of Senju Tobirama, the Nidaime Hokage, and was also trained by Senju Hashirama, the Shodaime Hokage. After being directly trained by two of the previous Hokages, Sarutobi Hiruzen adopted many of their principles and beliefs. The Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato, was trained by Jiraiya, one of Sarutobi's prize students and one of the Sannin. All of the Hokages had led the village with the beliefs of the Senju, always trusting their judgment. After years of being oppressed, they had finally reached their breaking point, and there would be no going back. Minato was broken out of his thoughts as he sensed someone land on the roof just outside of the office and climb through the window. "Sensei, I didn't expect you to be back so soon. I would have thought that you would at least stop by the hot springs for a few hours to do your research." The Toad Sage let out a chuckle. "Normally I would have, but the information I have is too important." Minato's face lost all of its playfulness from before. "The Toads summoned me to MT Mayaboku a few days ago. They came to me with a prophecy." Minato immediately remembered how seriously the Toads take their prophecies. The previous one Jiraiya believed was about him and how he would bring peace to the elemental nations. It hasn't happened, yet he believed it would someday. "What do they say, Sensei?" Jiraiya closed his eyes as he remembered what the prophecy was. "They told me that a child born from great power, but with memories of old, shall pave the way toward a new era of peace. Whether they walk the path of light or is forced into the darkness shall determine what the future will hold. Their predecessor has already burned the path for them, but it shall be their will of fire that determines whether they will walk it or forge their own." Minato, I believe that the child the prophecy speaks about is either Nawaki, Narumi, or Natsuki. I like to let them sign the Toad contract when on their birthday. Minato looked shocked. "Are you sure they're ready?" "And they've already signed Tsunade's slug contract too. Can a person even hold two contracts at once?" Jiraiya just nodded. "I have already spoken to Tsunade about this. She and the slugs both agreed, so it should be fine. Besides, their birthday is still 2 months away, and they'll start the academy a few weeks after, so it'll be perfect." Minato looked excited for the first time in weeks. "Okay, I'm sure they'd love it. I think I'll teach them how to summon after they start the academy." Jiraiya nodded and left out the window to do his research. Minato could hear him giggling as soon as he left. Little did they know that they couldn't be more wrong about the prophecy. Naruto's hospital room. It was dark, almost midnight. Visiting hours were over long ago, and only nurses working the night shift could be seen around the hospital. Though if you were to look into one of the rooms, you would see a skinny, frail-looking blonde stirring. His fingers would twitch every now and then. Groans could be heard escaping his mouth, and his breathing became irregular. Then there were flames. Orange-red flames surrounded his body, and he started glowing. After the flames disappeared from view, anybody would be shocked at what they saw. Gone was the skinny and frail build that looked as if he would break if you push him over, and laying there was a tanned, muscular blonde that looked as if he didn't have an ounce of body fat on him. Naruto slowly took off the oxygen mask that was hooked up to life support and tried to open his eyes. The key word was tried because there were bandages covering his forehead and the entire right side of his face. He unhooked himself from all of the machines, pulled himself to the side of the bed, and sat up. The first thing he noticed when he opened his left eye was that almost all of his body was covered in medical bandages. He noticed that he was in a hospital room and his mind tried to come up with the possibilities of why he was there. It was then that flashes of his fight with Natsuki made their way into his mind. Oh yeah, Natsuki lost control during our spar and almost killed me. I guess living someone else's memories in fast-forward messes with your memory a little. They were real, right? Of course they were to real, to be any kind of dream. I must have been out for a while if I was on life support. It was then that he headed towards the bathroom to see why he had all those bandages on him. Naruto slowly got up off of the bed and stumbled a little due to not walking for so long. After a minute or so, he managed to recover and walked into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. What he saw made him realize that his first assessment was correct. The entire right side of his body was covered in bandages. Naruto then noticed the length of his hair had grown considerably and resembled a hairstyle that Uchiha Madara had favored. He noted that what he had on were solely medical bandages, so that any wounds he had received under them would be able to breathe and heal over time. He closed his eyes and braced himself for what he would see, not wanting to make any conclusions until all of the bandages were off. He proceeded to unwrap them with his eyes closed. He unwrapped the last of the bandages and let them fall to the floor at his feet. He opened his left eye. For some reason, his right wouldn't open, and stood in front of the body-length mirror with a speechless expression. His mind was black and couldn't even form words for a minute. The first thing he did was move closer to the mirror and forcibly opened his right eyelids with his index finger and thumb. It was then that all his worries were confirmed as I was gone. Naruto removed his fingers from his face and focused more on the large scar over where his eye used to be. He traced his hand over its length and chuckled dryly at its design. The scar itself reached from his mid-forehead on the right side of his face and extended through his eye and ended to the right of his mouth in a lightning bolt pattern. Yup, a freaking lightning bolt. His eyes then moved downward and saw the scar that started near his trapezius and ended just a few inches above his waistline. It was several inches thick with fraying edges every inch or two. He felt every centimeter of the scar with his right hand and cringed, remembering what the pain of being sliced open felt like. By all means, he should have bled out. It was then that Naruto noticed that the skin on his right hand was burned off. The burn extended to an inch or two above his wrist. There wasn't a single patch of skin left in that area. What caught his sight next was that the burn on his leg had the same characteristics as his hand, only in the shape of a claw. All in all, he was a mess, but for some odd reason he smiled. Battle scars, huh? Proof that I fought and survived. I suppose that it's fitting for the past to mark me before moving on to a new future. With those thoughts in mind, he walked out of the bathroom and the hospital room he had been staying in and moved into the hallway. He looked out the window of the hallway while walking. It must be close to midnight. Konoha Hospital front desk. Naruto had just arrived in the lobby of the hospital and was only a few feet away from the front desk when all of the nurses turned to him in shock. Uzumaki Namikaze-sama, you're awake. You shouldn't be standing. You've been in a comatose state for a while now. Your body shouldn't even be able to function right now. The head nurse looked at him and saw that he was only wearing a pair of elastic shorts. In fact, your body was frail and weak yesterday. I don't know how you recovered so quickly. Even with medical ninjutsu, that should be impossible. Naruto looked at her with a blank face. I am fine. There is no need for your concern, but thank you. Now can you tell me how long I've been out for? The nurse looked shocked when he claimed to be fine. If I remember correctly, you've been in a coma for a little 4 months now. Oh, I need to contact your parents. Please stay here. With that, the head nurse left the hospital and left only a few of the other nurses behind. One of the other nurses decided to speak up. She'll be right back after contacting your parents. If you have any other questions about what has been going on while you've been in your coma, please feel free to ask us, and we'll answer to the best of our ability. Naruto looked at her thoughtfully. Do you keep visitors' logs for specific patients? The nurse looked at him oddly. Yes, we do, if fact yours should be. Right around here. She reached under the desk and pulled out a small booklet of sign-in sheets labeled Room 304. He started flipping through the pages, and predictably enough, Nawaki and Narumi had only visited the day that he was brought in, and he could count the times that Kushina and Minato visited on one hand. He smiled softly when he saw Hana's, Makoto's, Satsuki's, Itachi's, and Shursue's names written down. What surprised him the most was Natsuki. She had visited him every day that he had been in the hospital. It made him a little happy that at least someone in his old family still cared about him. Perhaps she just feels bad that she was the one who put me in there. Perhaps I should give her a chance. We may never be family ever again. But that doesn't mean I should forsake her completely. After all, a family isn't a group of people related to one another by blood. My memories of the Otsutsuki clan prove that. No, a family is a group of people who will do anything for each other and will love each other unconditionally. Hana, Mikoto, Satsuki, Shursue, Itachi, they're my family. It was at that point that the head nurse returned with Minato, Kushina, and Natsuki in tow. I figure I should just play as part of the perfect, happy little family for now. At least a little. Minato and Kushina just stood there with happy little smiles plastered on their faces, not realizing his thoughts. However, as soon as Natsuki saw him, she charged him at her top speed and glomped onto him, sobbing into his chest. He could hear the muffled cries of, "I'm sorry," and "It's all my fault," as he lovingly rubbed the back of her head. She looked up into his eyes, and sobbed, even hurt her, noticing all of his scars. The scars that she caused. Natsuki was just glad to have him back, and now they could become even closer than before. Poor Natsuki. Her dream may have come true had Namikaze's Minato not been their father. Chapter 4, Uchiha Massacre. OK, a lot of the reviews I've gotten are about Naruto giving out second chances, so let me address that. Last chapter, he was just surprised that Natsuki showed that she cared about him by visiting him in hospital every day. Naruto was always mature and is now even more so after living someone else's life for 6 months in his comatose state. He never completely hated her because him being neglected was a result of their parents' decisions, and she never really looked down on him. However, after this chapter, Naruto will pretty much cut all ties to his former family. I hope it addresses your concerns. I also hate it in Neglect FIC, where the authors decide to make him forgive everybody. But I also believe that because he won't see them as family anymore, over time it may come to some incest, which I always do find interesting and makes the plot more interesting. I also like to see when the Namikaze have to suffer from their actions. Another thing, some people have said that the Mera no Mi is weak compared to Kagaya or Hagoromo's abilities. I don't need to make him some overpowered god from the start. He is only 11, almost 12 right now. I'll be amping up the fruit's power and giving it a special spin later on, though, when he needs to become stronger. How strong the fruit also depends on the wielder, and Ace was incredibly strong in the past, having fought Kagaya alongside his brothers and ultimately defeating her. Why I made 5 fruits will also be addressed when Naruto finds his fruit. For those who are confused with the reincarnation, Naruto has already started to awake his innate ability to use flames, as seen with his extremely high fire affinity prowess with Katan Jutsu. When they healed him to a point where he would recover when he was fatally wounded, and finally when he was waking up from his coma, the flames restored him to his physical condition before he received his wounds, whereas flames have started to abilities similar to a phoenix, though it is somewhat like a reflex for his flames to act like this for now. Also, some people believe that I am trying to force the pairing with Hannah. I don't know how they came to this conclusion, but there is no pairing with Hannah. She will be his first friend and something like a sister figure for him. I introduced her early on with not much development because it seemed like a viable excuse for him to be out of the house so that he could be trained by Shursui. Now on to this chapter. It will be incredibly different than canon, mostly because I think that the fight between Shursui versus Danzo and Root is underplayed. I mean, Shursui was said to be the strongest Uchiha in generations, and yet he was defeated so easily. Even Kiri Shinobi fled when they knew they were up against Shursui, and yet the fight between him and Root was nothing special. I plan to make this fight what it should have been. Disclaimer: I do not own Naruto, Kishimoto does. One Piece belongs to Eiichiro Oda. The will of fire still burns. Uchiha Massacre. It was a cold fall morning for the people of Konoha in early October. It had been a rough few months for Naruto, especially. He had woken up from his coma 2 months ago and there were several things irritating him at the moment. The first was his physical condition. For some odd reason, or innate power, his body was in the same condition as it had been almost 6 months ago, but that didn't mean that he was without problems. Naruto had to begin his training from the ground up because his muscles had not been used for any kind of strenuous activity for months. Though that problem was rather easy to fix after several weeks of physical therapy and starting back up on his training regimen again. The second was Natsuki. She had become far too attached for Naruto's liking. At first he had thought that it was kind of sweet that she was worried for him, but now it was just pissing him off. She would cling to him whenever she could, and her eyes would start tearing up every time that she had looked at his face because of the scar. And of course, she was still blaming herself for it. Naruto knew that his accident wasn't completely her fault and didn't really blame her for it, but it didn't exactly drive them closer. Natsuki had started babying Naruto unnecessarily. Every time that he would try to leave the house, she would try to stop him, thinking that she would lose him again. Needless to say, Naruto had to resort to shining everywhere just so he wouldn't have to deal with her. Naruto had not been able to use his chakra at all while in his comatose state, so his training with Shursui had to start from the ground up once again. He could still remember their reactions to when he walked into the Uchiha compound the day after his dismissal from the hospital. Flashback, 2 months ago. It was the morning after Naruto had been discharged from the hospital, and he was on his way to the Uchiha compound. It had taken some doing to get used to using his body again, but he managed. "It's been a long time since I've been here, huh?" I wonder how they will react once they see me, were his thoughts as he walked up to the main gates of the Uchiha compound. Naruto was walking through the streets of the Uchiha district and noticed all of the stares he was getting. At first, the young blonde was confused as to why he was receiving all of the attention, but then it hit him. Ah, news about what happened to me must have spread through the village. It's not that often that your morning is greeted with the one-eyed son of the Hokage with a lightning bolt engraved into his face. Naruto wasn't too fond of the scar on his face. Sure, it was kind of cool, but it looked like something out of manga to him. How ironic. He was broken from his thoughts as he arrived right in front of his destination, the Uchiha clan head's house. Naruto had never met Fugaku before. Every time that he was over at the Uchiha compound, Fugaku was either at meetings with the clan elders or attending to his clan duties. But from what he had heard, Mikoto's husband had a stick shoved pretty far up his ass and was far too absorbed in the beliefs of the Uchiha clan to even make time for his wife. Naruto knocked on the door a few times before waiting for someone to answer. He then heard footsteps and a distinctly feminine voice. "Hold on, I'll be right there." The door slowly started to open a few moments later. "What can I do for Dash?" Mikoto just stared down slightly at Naruto with a shocked look on her face. Naruto just smiled softly at her. "It's good to see you again after so long, Mikoto-sama." It was then that Mikoto was broken out of her frozen state and hit him over the head with a wooden spoon that was in her hand. "How many times have I told you to call me Mikoto-chan?" "Mikoto-chan," she yelled tearfully and pulled him into a tight motherly hug. Hi, Mikoto-chan. "I've missed you." Naruto returned the hug toward his mother figure. It stayed like that for a few minutes as Mikoto let all of her tears out. Mikoto pulled away and wiped the tears from her eyes. "Why don't you come? I'm sure Satsuki and Shursui would love to see you." Asterisk sniff asterisk. I wish Itachi was here to see you again too, though. He has been busy with his AMBU duties over the past few months, but he visited you in the hospital when he had the time. We all did. It was then that they walked into the living room and Mikoto called out to her daughter and nephew, "Satsuki-chan, Fisukun, guess who came over to visit?" A few moments later, Shursui walked out of the bathroom sleepily, toothbrush still in his mouth. "Who could it possibly be to get you this worked up me Dash?" Shursui stopped his question as his eyes traveled to the long blonde-haired boy with a large scar on his face. He stared at the boy for a minute before his eyes widened, realizing who it is. "Naruto? Is that really you, Naruto?" Naruto smirked. "Does it really take you that long to recognize your own student sensei? We've known each other for over 3 years. You should be able to recognize me by now. I see you still have your poor manners as always." Mikoto could only stifle a laugh at the student and teacher interaction. Shursui was rooted in his spot. His toothbrush had long since fallen out of his mouth and landed on the floor. He couldn't believe it. The student whom many of the doctors told him would never wake up, including Tsunade herself, was standing in front of him. Sure, he had a few changes to his appearance, but it was definitely him. Nobody else was that rude or sarcastic with him. It just had to be him. That was when Satsuki chose to walk out of her room, still half asleep and in her pajamas. "What's going on?" she asked in her cute little voice as she yawned. It was then that she noticed that there was one extra person in the room. It was her Naruto and Ai. But he looked so different. Whatever, he's still my favorite Nai-san. Yes, over the years, she grew far more attached to him, and with Itachi always gone on his ANBU duties, she wound up spending much more time with Naruto. Because of this, she always played with him and watched him train. There were even times that she refused to sleep in her own bed, opting to cuddle up with her Naruto and Ai in the guest bedroom. She really did love her Naruto and Ai. She even had dreams about him sometimes. Satsuki knew that her Inai-san was in a coma, and they didn't know if he would wake up, and that made her sad. So much so that her dreams about them spending time together only increased. Because of this, she thought that him standing there in her living room was just another dream, so she wanted to make the most of it. She walked up to Naruto and just hugged him tightly and looked up at him with tears threatening to fall. I love you, Naruto and Ai. Even if you are a dream, never leave me alone again. Shursui got out of his shock and smiled sincerely at the scene, while Makoto just cooed at cute they looked together. Naruto cupped her chin and raised her head up so that she was looking into his eye. Satsuki, I promise I won't leave you ever again. I'm not going to be dying that easily anytime soon. Satsuki clung on to him even tighter. By the way, what do you mean dreams? I'm right here, Satsuki-chan. Have you been having dreams about me? Naruto asked in a teasing tone. Needless to say, Satsuki flushed red with embarrassment after realizing that she was wide awake, which caused everyone in the room to erupt in laughter. They spent the rest of the day catching up with each other. Naruto was naturally curious about everything that happened while he was unconscious, and the Uchihas were curious about his new scars and appearance. It was decided that Shursui would help him get back on track with his training before the academy started in a couple of months. Flashback end. It was October 10th. Some believe that this day was cursed because of all the things that had happened on this day. The Kyuubi attack, the birth of the Uzumaki Namikaze's quadruplets, and the death of the Sandaime Hokage. Little did they know that another event would be engraved into that curse as of tonight. As of this moment, Naruto was cursing the Nidaime Hokage for creating the academy. It was the most pointless and boring thing he could ever think of doing at this moment. He had learned everything that the academy had to offer already. He had mastered the henge, kawarimi, and bunshin ages ago, and he heard that people actually failed to graduate because they couldn't preform them. He just couldn't fathom it. Naruto had started the academy 2 months ago, and guess what he found out? The entire first year of the academy is devoted to language, mathematics, history, physical education, etc. There were classes for civilian students. The blonde could not actually believe that his parents wanted him to wait to train until the academy started. He would essentially be wasting another year. The only redeeming quality about today was that it was the Kyuubi festival, where the villagers and shinobi would celebrate the Yondaime's defeat of the Kyuubi in a festival going on in the center of the village. Because of this, class got out at noon so that everybody could get ready for the celebrations. Now, Naruto didn't care about this. What he did care about, that it was his and his siblings' birthdays. Unlike his siblings, however, Naruto wasn't excited for the party they would be having tonight or all of the gifts that he would receive. No, Naruto would usually spend the night on top of the Hokage monument, after receiving a few gifts from the people that actually mattered to him. He would sit on the Sandaime's head and wonder thoughts such as, was it good that I was born? Would anybody cared if I died? He had always pondered his own existence, and had trouble accepting his parentage, seeing as how they had never shown him the kind of love that a child should receive. Naruto had even more to think about now, as his values were similar to Ace's, and he had found his answer only at his death. He was brought out of his musing as Satsuki grabbed his hand and dragged him out of the classroom towards the Uchiha compound. I guess class already ended, and I was too preoccupied with my own thoughts to notice. They finally made it to the Uchiha district and started walking through the streets. It was then that Naruto's thoughts ran wild as he noticed everyone looking over at him nervously. Why does everyone look so nervous around me? It can't be because I'm an outsider. I always come here. I've noticed before too, pretty much all of the Uchiha, except the children, have been looking pretty on edge the past month or two, especially when I'm around. Could it be because of how close I am to Satsuki, because she's a member of the clan head's family? No, that doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Perhaps it is because I'm the Hokage's son. If that's the case, then they're probably planning something. Whatever it is, it can't be good. A normal 12-year-old boy wouldn't notice such things, but it can be said that Naruto is a genius or some type of prodigy, only second to Itachi. I suppose there's no use worrying about it at the moment. I might as well just enjoy spending today with my family. With those thoughts in mind, they arrived at the house and took of their shinobi sandals before heading into the living room. The only ones there were Mikoto and Hana. "Happy birthday, Naruto!" they both shouted. Naruto looked around and noticed that neither Shursui nor Itachi were there. Mikoto noticed him looking around and chose this moment to speak. "Sorry, Naruto-kun, but Shursui and Itachi aren't here. They were called to the Hokage Tower earlier today." Her eyes looked sad at that last part, and Naruto noticed that, but they did leave behind gifts in case they didn't see you later on today. Naruto noticed that Mikoto was forcing a smile. "Mikoto-chan, you know, I don't believe in celebrating my birthday." Hana voiced her own opinion on the matter. "We all know how you feel. Just don't think of this as a birthday party then. Just all of spending the day together. Now go ahead and open your presents." Mikoto nodded and handed Naruto a navy blue box with a red rope tied around it. He opened the box and found two things. The first was a pure black eye patch. A chuckle escaped his mouth after seeing the present. The second was a scroll. He opened the scroll and gasped. This is Dash." It was Mikoto who answered him. "That is from Itachi. It's his own personal scroll of all of the Jinjutsu that he know or has created. He thought that you might like it, seeing as how you're quite interested in Jinjutsu." Naruto was left speechless. I don't know what to say. Mikoto smiled sadly, knowing that these would be the final gifts he received from part of his family. Now, for Shizukun's gift. She grabbed another box. This one was black and had the Uchiha's clan emblem on the front of it. Naruto opened the box and saw a thicker black scroll. He tried to open it, but couldn't. Naruto was surprised at not being able to read his sensei's present. Mikoto saw his surprised expression and figured that she should explain. "This scroll contains every jutsu that Shursukun knows, as well as a few that he thought that you might like." Naruto's shock only grew. Every jutsu that Shursu Sensei knows. Sensei is the most powerful Uchiha of this generation and knows dozens of different jutsus. But still, that doesn't explain why I can't open the scroll. As you may have noticed, you're not able to open it just yet. Certain circumstances must be met before it'll open for you. But he said that those circumstances should be met sooner rather than later. Naruto noticed Mikoto's downcast expression. Okay, something has to be going on. Mikoto is always so sweet and energetic. She's almost never sad. And both Shursui and Itachi not being here. Why would Minato call them to the Hokage Tower? He should be helping to set up for the party tonight. Maybe I should show up to the party for once, just to see what's going on. Mikoto noticed Naruto looking at her suspiciously and decided to take his mind off of whatever he was thinking, knowing that he was too smart for his own good. Okay, everyone, time for cake. That brought Naruto out of his musings. Whatever, I'll figure it out later. Hokage Tower, meeting room, 2 p.m. The Yondaime Hokage, Namake's Minato, was sitting behind a long desk inside of the Hokage's personal meeting room. Sitting beside him were all three of the elders, Hamura, Kohara, and Danzo. In front of them were two kneeling Yinbyu operatives, Uchiha Shursui and Uchiha Itachi. These two were Minato's spies inside of the Uchiha clan. They had just finished reporting all of the information they had on the Uchiha's plan for the coup d'etat. Minato rubbed the bridge of his nose. He really wished that it didn't have to come to this. Is that everything you could gather? Do they really plan to revolt against Konoha? Shursui closed his eyes and let out a sigh. Hi, Hokage-sama. The children have no idea that the rest of the clan plans on doing this, though. The only one who has spoken against it is Uchiha Mikoto and has refused to participate in the coup. Minato was glad that his wife's friend was still on their side. Where will she be tonight? Itachi chose to reply. She is one of the only Uchiha to have relation with those outside of the clan. Tonight she should be at your children's birthday party, Hokage-sama. Minato smiled, knowing that she would be spared should things not go as planned. If the Uchiha have decided to wage war on Konoha, then we will have no choice but to judge them as traitors to the village, Kohara declared. Hamura decided to voice his opinion. Yes, I believe that is the correct course of action. We need to deal with them now before they take action and cost us the lives of countless shinobi and civilians in a conflict with the village. Danzo looked impassively as Minato, already having plans of his own. You know what you must do, Minato. Are you willing to risk the lives of everyone in the village based on the actions of one clan? Minato just sighed. If this situation isn't taken care of, then it will cause a civil war inside of Konoha. Any war will suffer losses on both sides. I am not willing to risk the lives of the villagers based solely on the actions of the Uchiha. Should a civil war break out and the other hidden villages catch wind of it, then it will give them a chance to invade the village while we are weak. If this problem is not taken care of before the revolt, then it may as well lead to the Fourth Great Shinobi War. All those in the room came to the same conclusion. Minato continued, I have a plan to take care of this. Shursui, you have the most powerful eyes seen in several generations of Uchiha. I need you to put Fugaku under your control for as long as you can. I need you to but me as much time as possible until I can come up with a way to negotiate peacefully with the Uchiha. Shursui nodded. Tonight, during my children's party and the Kyubi festival, I want you to place this Jinjutsu on him. The Uchiha do not usually come to either of these events, so it will be the perfect opportunity. Minato sighed. However, I do have a backup plan should you fail or if the Uchiha catch wind of our plan. This caught the attention of both the Uchiha and the elders in the room. Itachi, Shursui, you two are to separate the moment you leave this office and are not to make contact with each other until 5 p.m., exactly when your mission will start. Itachi, you are to wait outside the main gates of the Uchiha compound, and should Shursui not arrive at exactly 5 p.m., then you are to exterminate the Uchiha 1 hour later. Everyone in the room gasped as they heard Minato's plan. They were expecting to hear a plan such as this, but expecting and hearing are two different things. Though you are to leave anyone under the age of 12 alive, since they have nothing to do this coup d'etat, and your mother, should she be at the compound. Itachi, should it come to this, then you are to leave this village as a nuke-nin. Itachi nodded. Good, then you're dismissed. Let's hope that everything goes smoothly tonight. Danzo had his own thoughts on his mind. I cannot let Shursui succeed. They are traitors who have gone against Konoha and will do it again if they receive the chance. If my plan works, then I shall gain the Mangekyo Sharingan and all of the Sharingan left in the corpses of the Uchiha. Konoha Forest, 4 p.m. Uchiha Shursui was not having a good day. First, he found out that the coup d'etat was going to take place tomorrow. Then he had to miss his student's birthday party because he had to report to the Hokage and the elders. Then he is given the order to place the Uchiha clan head under his Genjutsu to control him. And now, before he could make it to the Uchiha compound to pre-form his mission, he was intercepted by Danzo. Shursui had already known that Danzo would have some kind hidden agenda, so he was ready. This fact alone was the reason that Shursui still had both of his eyes. Danzo had tried to give him some kind of speech about protecting the leaf his own and came at him with the intention to steal his eye. However, Shursui caught his wrist and put him under a powerful Sharingan Genjutsu. He knew it wouldn't last, though. As soon as the Uchiha activated his Sharingan, he noticed the chakra in Danzo's right eye. It was the same chakra color as a Sharingan. Shursui immediately realized that the only reason that Danzo would have a Sharingan was to use the Izanagi, a forbidden jutsu of the Sharingan that allows the user to alter fate. However, the cost of using it is blindness in the eye that was used. He quickly shunned Shine to his left, and sure enough, the Danzo that he was looking at disappeared, and another reappeared right behind where he used to be standing. How did you manage to see through my Izanagi? Danzo asked, annoyed. Did you really think that any illusion could escape my Sharingan? The one-eyed man sighed. I suppose I'll have to approach this differently then. Danzo signaled for his root to come out of the shadows and appear before him. 20 shinobi wearing blank porcelain masks and regular Yanbiyu attire shined onto the battleground. 2 more appeared in different clothing, though. Both of them wore short-sleeved black jackets with high collars and red straps. Both of them also had tantos strapped to their backs. The first one had shoulder-length orange hair and wore his black jacket open with a brown kimono-like shirt underneath. The second one had short black hair, wore a strange mask covering the top half of his face. He wore clothing similar to an Aburame's under his jacket. He recognized these two as Yamanaka Fu and Aburame Torian. Both of them were members of his graduating class back at the academy. He had always wondered what happened to them. Shursui stared at the root, assessing them. A bit excessive, if you ask me. I mean, I am only one man, and yet you send some of your best operatives after me along with yourself? You must be getting old, Danzo. Danzo just stared at him impassively. It is quite the contrary, actually. You are the strongest Uchiha to have been born in generations. But that ends now. I will take your eyes and then retrieve the eyes from the Uchiha corpses that Itachi will leave behind. I shall protect Konoha with my own two hands. I can't let him go through with any of that. It will go against everything that we have been working towards. I need to take care of him now. Shursui started weaving hand seals and finally ended in the tiger's seal, Katan. Gokakyu no Jutsu, Shursui breathed out a large fireball that was aimed straight for Danzo. As the large fireball moved closer, all of the roots started weaving hand seals. Sueton, Mizrappa, large torrents of water escaped from each of their mouths and met the oversized fireball in the middle of the field. Their collision produced a steam that covered the entire field. It was a bad idea to counter on their part when they could have easily dodged. Shursui could easily sense their chakra signatures while in the steam and proceeded to make his move. The Uchiha shined across the battlefield, drew his tanto, and proceeded to slit the throats of 5 root agents before someone realized what he was doing. 2 charged him, but were easily disabled by a Sharingan. Jinjutsu, and their chests slashed open with a tanto enhanced with Katan chakra. Futon, Daitapa, Danzo let loose a large gust of wind to blow away the steam, but by then Shursui had already killed 3 more of his root agents. Shursui sheathed his tanto and reached behind him into the 2 weapons pouches on his belt. A group of 6 root began to charge him with kunai in hand, but after they had taken their first few steps, Shursui shined in between the group and let loose a barrage of shuriken, killing them instantly. I'm glad that most of Danzo's root are only mid-chunin to low jonin level shinobi. Had they been more skilled, I may have already been dead by now. Shursui jumped back and started to quickly go through his hand signs, hoping to finish all of them off. Katan, Zukuka, he unleashed a small fireball towards them which erupted into a giant firestorm, causing widespread destruction and incinerating a large part of the forest they were in. Danzo, Fu, and Torian managed to get out of the blast radius, but they were forced to dodge the flying debris that the jutsu caused. The 4 remaining root were not as fortunate and were incinerated instantly. What was the previous battlefield was now nothing more than crater and completely scorched debris. Many of the trees were still on fire, creating even more shadows, and the setting sun wasn't going to make it easier to find them. Danzo, Fu, and Torian were nowhere in sight. The young Uchiha knew that they had escaped his last jutsu and were now waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Fu is a Yamanaka, so he will specialize in mind techniques, and Torian is an Aburame, so he'll be using bug techniques. If I remember correctly, he specialized in venomous bugs, which is why he always wore so much clothing. They'll probably try to work together to bring me down. It's likely that they're the strongest shinobi that Danzo has in his root. They'll probably be at least mid-jonin level. I'll need to be careful. I need to take care of them first, and then I can focus on Danzo. He was right. Out of the corner of his eye, the Sharingan picked up the movement of 2 people moving out of the forest shadows. He jumped to the right to dodge a barrage of kunai that would have killed him had he not seen it. They charged him, moving in a zigzag pattern, and tried to overwhelm him with taijutsu. Then Fu unsheathed his tanto, while Shursui pulled out his own. They engaged in a fierce kenjutsu match, trading blow for blow, sparks flying everywhere. Shursui slowly overwhelming him, but just as he was about to take control, he jumped back to avoid a punch from Torian. Shursui noticed that the ground where the punch connected was being eaten away by a strange purple substance. Those must be his nano-sized, poisonous insects. It seems that they corrode whatever is touched. Quite the troublesome ability. I can't let him touch me. I need to put some distance between us. Shursui shunned Shine to the other side of the battlefield and unleashed a barrage of shuriken towards them. They jumped out of the way and prepared for another assault. Torian slowly began to remove his jacket and later his shirt until he was topless. The poisonous insects spread to completely cover his entire body. Damn, so now I can't even touch him? I'll have to rely on my ninjutsu and jinjutsu now. Fu was the first to rush at Shursui. He made a peculiar hand sign that was used by all of the Yamanaka. Shintenshin no Jutsu. Fu quickly took over Shursui's mind, but was quickly forced out with the help of a Sharingan. However, it was enough time for Torian to get close and grab his left arm. Shursui quickly pulled away, but the damage had already been done. Arg. Damn it, he infected me with those damn insects. I have no other choice. Shursui quickly unsheathed his tanto. He concentrated Katan chakra into it and brought it down on his left arm, severing it at just below the elbow. I need to finish this quickly. I've already spent enough time with these two. The one-armed Uchiha quickly put the tanto in his mouth and grabbed a handful of shuriken and threw them at Fu while making a few one-handed seals. Shuriken, Kagabunshin, no Justu. Fu was able to dodge the majority of them, but was hit by a few. He winced, and as he opened his eyes back up, was met with a pair of Sharingan. Jinjutsu, sleep. Fu slowly lost consciousness before he fell to his knees, and his head was severed by Shursui's tanto. Fu, he heard Torian yell. As soon as Fu's head hit the ground, Torian rushed towards Shursui and threw a barrage of punches and kicks out of rage. Shursui was forced to dodge them all, not wanting to risk being infected by the poisonous insects again. The Sharingan uses finally found an opening after ducked under one of Torian's punches and drove his fire encased tanto in his heart. He overloaded the tanto with Katan chakra and burned a hole right through where Torian's heart used to be. Shursui's hand and arm was completely burned from the use of Katan chakra, but he pushed through it, knowing that he still had one fight left in him. He turned around and was greeted with the sight of Danzo. The bandages on his face were gone, revealing a pure white eye, a sign of blindness from the use of his Izanagi. He had tossed away his large black robe and was left shirtless so his right arm could clearly be seen. It was a sickly gray color with what looked to be a face on the shoulder. I asked at a face. What the hell is up with his arm? So, it has come down for me to actually fight? You are indeed strong, Uchiha, Shursui, but you shall meet your end by my hand, just as so many others have. Shursui reached into his weapons pouch and pulled out 3 kunai with exploding tags attached. Before Danzo could even move, Shursui enhanced the kunai with futon chakra and threw them through the air at a piercing speed. Danzo couldn't get out of the way, So he just put his hands in a singular seal, Mo-Katan. Moko Jihiki, Danzo created dome-shaped wooden wall made from tree roots to protect him from the blast. TCH. He can even use the Mokutan? What the hell is going on? It must somehow be connected to that arm and face. I have to close the distance. I can't let him use any more Mokutan Jutsu. Shursui rushed an unharmed Danzo and engaged him with Taijutsu. The Sharingan was able to predict Danzo's movements perfectly, and he managed to avoid a majority of them. But his body could keep up with that speed for long, and was eventually overwhelmed and launched into a tree with a punch to the chest from Danzo. Danzo rushed Shursui once again, but this time he had to avoid a series of small fireballs coming from one of the tree branches. He quickly wove a few hand seals, futon. Shinkaha, a highly compressed blade of wind, escaped Danzo's mouth and cut the tree down, along with several others in the area. Shursui shunshined back to the ground panting, about 30 feet behind Danzo, before the trees could collapse onto each other. Damn it, I'm tiring out. I need to finish him off soon. If I can't change the fate of the Uchiha clan, then I'll at least do Konoha the service of killing this bastard. Danzo saw the exhausted form of Shursui over his shoulder. I suppose I'll finish this right now. Danzo finished his hand seals and inhaled a deep breath of air. Futon. Shinko. Danzo then released a large, crushing sphere of wind chakra meant to completely crush Shursui. But when the dust cleared, Danzo couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him stood a completely battered Shursui with his Mangekyo Sharingan active within a large red skeletal figure. A second later, muscle and tissue began to wrap around the skeletal figure, and then its chakra began to flare until it was completely clad in armor. Danzo was about to summon Baku, but before he could even flinch, he was pierced with a large orange sword of ethereal energy. This is the third and final power of the Mangekyo Sharingan, the Susanoo. This is my last resort, my perfect defense. Danzo. Nothing can penetrate it. To think that I'd actually be forced to use it. You're finished, Danzo. That blade stabbing you through the stomach is the sword of Tatsuka. It is an ethereal weapon, an enchanted blade that seals anyone it pierces into the world of drunken dreams for all eternity, never to see the light of day again. Goodbye, Shimura. Danzo. With that, Danzo was slowly absorbed into the blade and sealed into the sake bottle from which the blade came from. Shursui deactivated his Mangekyo Sharingan and his left eye back into his normal Sharingan. He clutched his right eye in pain. Erf damn, I was just a second too late in activating my Susanoo. One of the stray wind blade from his last jutsu managed to damage my eye. I was lucky to still be able to use the Susanoo after that. Well, it's finally over. From how dark it is, I'd say that it's around 6 o'clock. I was too late, damn it, Danzo. It was then that Shursui started coughing up a large amount of blood. So I was right. He must have collapsed one of my lungs with that chakra-enhanced punch that sent me flying into the tree. That must have been why I could only preform low-level Katan Jutsus. I can already feel my other lung being filled with blood. I assume I won't be able to breathe anymore within the hour. His hand then went up to his eye as he was brought back to his thoughts. I suppose my student could use one last gift from his sensei. Shursui took out an empty scroll and wrote a small note in it. He summoned one of his messenger crows to deliver the message. And with that done, he hobbled not too far away to the meeting place he wrote down. Uzumaki Namake's estate. Naruto was not having a fun night. He had thought that as he went home to the birthday celebration at the Uzumaki Namake's estate, then he might find some answers as to why Makoto had been so depressed that afternoon. He had seen her at the party, but she was acting pretty much the same, so he decided to put it out of his mind at the time. He had left when it was time for his siblings to open their presents, and the first one they received was the Toad contract from Jiraiya, and he told them about some prophecy. Naruto, for one, never believed in prophecies, but he was a little upset that they received yet another summoning contract only a few months into the academy while he got nothing. He should have expected that. It was right after he left the estate that a crow landed on his shoulder and handed him a scroll. Crows were Shursui's summons, and he never used them unless it was an emergency. So Naruto quickly unrolled the scroll. It read, "Dear Naruto, meet me at the cliff overlooking the Naka River, just outside of the clearing where we met for the first time. Come as quick as possible. There are things you need to know, as well as one final gift from me. Come as quickly as possible. I don't have much time to speak to you. Make sure you aren't followed." Shursui. What could all of that mean? Might as well hurry. I don't have anything else to do. He quickly rushed towards their desired meeting spot, wanted to get there as fast as possible. Cliffside, 5 minutes later. Naruto finally arrived at the specified location, making sure he wasn't followed. He saw Shursui standing near the edge of the cliff, facing the river, waiting for him. Naruto approached quietly, wondering what it was that was so important that he was called all the way to the outskirts of the village. "Naruto, it's good to see you. I'm glad you could make it here quick enough," Shursui commented as he slowly turned around. "Sensei, what was it that was so import dash?" He stopped his line of thought when he saw Shursui's battered form. There was a large gash over his right eye and was releasing a large amount of blood from it. There were cuts and bruises all over his body. He was coughing up large amounts of blood, but the worst was his arm. His left arm was completely severed from his body, and he was bleeding profusely from the stump. "Sensei, what happened to you? Who did this to you? We need to get you to a hospital right now." "No, it's too late for the hospital. One of my lungs is already collapsed, and the other one is filling up as we speak. So please just listen to me. You need to know the truth about everything." Naruto just stood there, tears threatening to spill, as his sensei bled out in front of him. The Uchiha clan was planning a coup d'etat. Over the years, they had lost much of their power, both politically and influentially. The main cause of this was they were blamed for the Kyuubi attack on the village 12 years ago. What Minato said, that it was a natural disaster, an accident from childbirth. Naruto argued, "Yes, it was, but that isn't the whole truth. There were witnesses who claimed to have seen the Sharingan in the Kyuubi's eyes. The village believed that sometime after it escaped, it was used by the Uchiha to attack the village as revenge for the way they had been treated over the years, living under the ideals of the Senju. The only Sharingan jutsu strong enough to control a Bijuu is the Kotoema Sukumi, and that particular ability has only been known to 2 people with the Mangekyo Sharingan, Uchimadura and me." At that last sentence, Naruto gasped. "I can tell you, that wasn't me. I personally believe that the QB was never taken out of the control of Madara and has remained in effect after all of this time. The Kodoeme Tsukumi is the most powerful Jinjutsu to ever exist. If it were to fall into the wrong hands, it could spell the world as we know it. Naruto, once I die tonight, people will try to steal my remaining eye for themselves. Naruto, I want you to have it. Naruto could only remain speechless. What? Naruto, you're my only student as well as one of my best friends. Please take my eye and help to carry on my will. This shall be my final gift to you. Think of it as a birthday present. Shui said, all the while smiling. Naruto could only nod. Shui made a Kage Bunshin and reached into his right eye socket and pulled the Sharingan out. The Kage Bunshin took it and removed the eye patch from Naruto's right eye. He began to implant the eye with his limited knowledge of medical ninjutsu. After the operation was finished, the Kage Bunshin put the eye patch back on Naruto and poofed out of existence. Shui stood before him with both of his bleeding eye sockets closed. Now then for the rest of my tale. Itachi and I were working as spies for the Hokage because both of us knew that a civil war within Konoha would have sparked the fourth great shinobi war when other villages would have tried to invade when we would be weakest. Father was the cause of all of this. The coup was going to happen tomorrow, and it needed to be stopped one way or another. It was decided that I would control Fugaku using the Kodoeme Tsukumi, but I never got the chance to. One of the elders, Shimura Danzo, stood in my way. He had some sick sense of loyalty to Konoha and planned to steal my eyes and then the rest of the Uchiha when they were dealt with. I managed to defeat and seal him away, so you don't have to worry about him. Asterisk cough, asterisk cough, cough. He spat out an enormous amount of blood and smiled sadly. It seems that my time is running shorter than I thought. I'm sorry that I can't tell you the rest of this directly, but this should be good enough. Memory transference jutsu. With those words, he touched Naruto's forehead and memories from awakening the Sharingan to the secrets of the Mangekyo, to the meeting with the Yondaime and the elders, to Shusui's final battle with Root and Danzo flooded Naruto's mind. Thank you for being my student. Naruto, with those final words, the life faded from Shusui's voice and his body fell into Naruto's arms. The will of fire still burns. Aftermath. Konoha Cemetery. It had been a few days since the Uchiha massacre. Naruto was seething in rage at the moment. He had to use all of the willpower that he had built up over the years to stop himself from releasing his most deadly Katon Jutsu upon everyone who was attending the funeral for the Uchiha clan. The reason for this silent rage? Minato and the elders had decided to come and pay their respects for the fallen Uchiha. Not only that, but as the Hokage, he had given a speech about how much of a tragedy the massacre was and how much Konoha would suffer from it. Naruto knew that Minato probably saved many lives by ordering the masses, and that he had made the right decision to stop the coup before it could begin. But he had made the right decision as the Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, not as his father. Naruto knew that the Hokage would have to do whatever was best for the village. However, that also means that if the Hokage's own family stopped believing in the will of fire, then they would be eliminated as well. That is what Minato did to his own son. The Yondaime had taken away half of Naruto's family from his. He had taken away Itachi by forcing his to slaughter his own clan, leaving only children and his mother alive, and forced him to become a Nukenin. He had taken away Sure Sway with his inability to control his own advisors, letting Danzo run free. Minato should have known that the old war hawk would have tried to do something on his own, especially during a situation where the whole village's safety was at stake. With these two actions, he had lost his son. It was raining now. It had been for the better part of the hour, but three figures could still be seen at the cemetery. All three of them were wearing black funeral attire. One was a beautiful older woman with black hair and pale skin. Her eyes were red from crying so much and had bags under them. The second was a young man with long blonde hair and was wearing an eye patch over his right eye. The final one was a 9-year-old girl with empty black eyes and red puffy cheeks. These three were Uchiha Makoto, Uzumaki Namikaze's Naruto, and Uchiha Satsuki. The other Uchiha that had been left alive numbered no more than 7. Those who were old enough had already gone back to the compound, and those who weren't had already been escorted back to the orphanage. All three of them were silent, not having the voice to speak from the amount of sobbing that they had done. All three of them had different thought running through their minds. Why did it have to come to this? Fugaka had always been too prideful in the clan and wanted the Uchiha to spread their power and influence, but was this really the only way? Could things have turned out differently? Were Makoto's thoughts? Is this really what Konoha stands for? Fight side by side until their ideals start to waver from your own, and then slaughter them just so they can't turn on you? Is this really what Ace and Sure Sway worked so hard for? I refuse to believe that this is all that there is to life. I shall live my life on my own terms until the day I die. Freedom, family, and my own ideals. I shall live by those 3 things alone, was Naruto's declaration. Why? Why did Itachi do all of this? He put me to sleep with his Jinjutsu before I could find out why Satsuki looked over to Naruto. I don't want to die like everybody else. If I die, then Naruto and I will be sad. I won't let us be sad. Never again. We promised that neither one of us would die. Was that the reason Itachi spared me? Satsuki didn't know what to think of everything that had happened, but she did know one thing. If she died, her Naruto and I would be sad, and if Naruto died, she would be sad. She would never let either of those things happen. The massacre had hit them all hard, incredibly so. They were still picking up the pieces that Itachi had shattered, and still would be for a long time to come. That was when Makoto started sobbing again. She fell to her knees, and the tears started pouring down her face, mixing with the raindrops so they were barely noticeable. Naruto quickly got down on one knee and embraced her. He noticed he had been doing this a lot ever since he first saw her again the day after the massacre. Normally, he would blush at the contact, but this wasn't one of her motherly hugs or the ones where she would press her assets onto his back. No, this was serious. He had never seen Makoto so broken before. For now, he just let her cry in his chest while stroking her hair, not uttering a single word. There were no words that could fix how she was feeling. Satsuki was standing behind them, staring at her mother intently. She was jealous that she wasn't the one being embraced, but she understood. Her mother was taking things really badly. After Makoto started to calm down a bit, Naruto decided they should get back to the compound. After all, it was pouring out. Makoto, Satsuki, let's head home. I think we've spent enough time here today, and the rain doesn't look like it's going to let up anytime soon. You'll catch a cold at this rate. Besides, someone's out to look out for you two now." Both of them nodded at his words. Mikoto smiled for the first time since the massacre happened. It was rare for anyone to get a glimpse at Naruto's gentle and caring side. With that, they left the cemetery to head back to the Uchiha compound, Mikoto not ever letting go of Naruto's hand. Konoha Council Room. Minato, Hamura, and Koharu were all sitting in the council chambers discussing the outcome of their latest assignment. It turned out rather well, all things considered, Koharu stated. "Yes, but we had to rely on the backup plan, which was something I wish that we didn't have to do," Minato responded solemnly. "I too wish that we could have come to a peaceful outcome. Whatever happened to Shursui that night, I was sure that he would have succeeded, and there was only a small chance that the Uchiha would have found out about our plan beforehand." Hamura stated his own opinion. Minato closed his eyes for a minute and thought, "I don't know exactly what happened, but I know that Danzo is involved with it somehow. From what Itachi told me, Shursui never showed up, so it is likely that something stopped him from doing so. Danzo has also been missing since Shursui and Itachi left this room. We also found the bodies of over a dozen of his root agents in the forest near the Naka River, where it looks like a battle took place. Did either of you two know that he had his roots still active?" It was more of a demand rather than a question. There was silence for a moment, but Koharu decided to answer. "I had my suspicions that he never disbanded them when Hiruzen ordered them to, but I never found any proof of this. I knew that he did some kind of underground dealings, but I never knew what he was into or what he did," Hamura replied. "Whatever the case is, he's most likely dead. He would never be gone from Konoha for so long when something so important is happening. So it begs the question of what happened. If either of you two find out anything about what happened to Danzo, I want you to inform me immediately." Both of the advisors nodded. Koharu decided to move to the next topic. Now, onto the actual massacre. How many were left alive exactly? Minato looked on a piece of paper with the information of the aftermath written on it. There were 9 Uchiha left alive. Mikoto, being the only adult, is now the current clan head. There are 3 currently enrolled in the academy. The rest are too young to be entered into the academy and are currently being taken care of by the orphanage until they're old enough to live on their own. There is one more grown Uchiha, but he is working as a liaison between us and Kiri in case our alliance with Suna doesn't work out. He was also against the coup, but hasn't been in Konoha in well over 3 years. Hamura want to clarify something. Itachi is supposed to be infiltrating that suspicious organization that just started up, correct? Yes, the Akatsuki. It is an organization made up of a few S-ranked nuke-nin, but we have no idea what their goals are or what their purpose is as of yet. Itachi will be acting as our spy in the meantime. That organization had been worrying them for a while, especially after rumors began to spread that they had taken out Hanzo of the Salamander, the very same man that defeated all 3 of the legendary Sannin in their prime and gave them their title. Koharu was concerned. How many know the truth about what happened on the night of the Uchiha massacre? Only us, Itachi, and Mikoto. How wrong they were. Uchiha compound. It had been a long day. Emotions had been running high. The funeral had lasted several hours, and people kept coming up to the survivors of the Uchiha clan to express their condolences. That is the reason why Mikoto had just finished putting Satsuki to bed. She was still a 9-year-old girl after all. She had just come out of Satsuki's room after making sure she was sound asleep. The Ravenette walked into the living and sat down on the couch right next to Naruto and leaned onto his shoulder. She loved his warmth, and right now, she could use the comfort. She had grown quite accustomed to it over the past few days. However, Naruto had things he needed to discuss with Mikoto. He first wanted to find out if she would tell him the truth, so he started out simple. How long did you know it was going to happen? Makoto's eyes widened in shock. He can't be asking about the coup or the massacre, could he? There's no way he should know the truth about either of them. She decided to act confused. What are you talking about, Naruto-kun? I want to know how long you knew the massacre would take place. You were the clan head's wife. It would be obvious you knew about the coup d'etat since the very beginning. Mikoto's eyes widened in shock. However, she calmed herself down and closed her eyes. I never knew about the massacre specifically, but I had a feeling that this would be the outcome. I never wanted the clan to stage a coup. All of the unnecessary loss of life for what? Power? The clan were too stuck in their past glory and only wanted more power that they thought they were entitled to. I refused to take part of it. I had to think about Satsuki, you know. She's still just a little girl. How would she grow up without a mother? Naruto cringed at that last part. She would have probably ended up like him. Nonetheless, he was glad that she was honest with him. Thank you, Mikoto-chan. Huh? She was confused. She was expecting an angry outburst, a slap across the face, for him to never talk to her again. Everything except for those words had run across her mind when he first asked her about the massacre. Then she realized something. You knew about all of this too, didn't you? Naruto shook his head no. At least not before everything took place. I learned everything that night, from the Uchiha's decision to stage a coup to what happened during Shursue's and Itachi's meetings with the Hokage and the elders, and even how they came to the final outcome. Mikoto was left speechless. You were just testing me, weren't you? Naruto wrapped his arms around her in a tight embrace. Yes. I wanted to know if you would trust me enough to tell me the truth, and you did. For that, I thank you. How? Who told you all of this? Naruto didn't say anything for a moment. He pulled back from their hug and looked her in the eye. Obsidian black eyes met one cold gray eye. The blonde slowly reached for his eye patch and slowly removed it. He then opened his right eye. Mikoto gasped as Naruto revealed his lone three-tomo Sharingan. Shursue-sensei told me everything that night. Naruto then proceeded to tell him everything that happened between Shursue and himself on that cliffside, and to everything that happened to Shursue before they met up. He's gone now, Mikoto-chan. He died right there in my arms. And you know what the last thoughts on his mind were about me, and how happy he was to have me as a student. Sensei didn't want to die without me knowing the truth behind everything he did. Naruto finally let his tears loose at the end. Mikoto had been rubbing the back of his head affectionately as he reached the end of his story. This had been one of the few times that Naruto had openly cried in front of her. Minato took away the first person who ever truly treated me like family away from me. One of the few people who actually showed me that they were happy I existed. I can't bring myself to see him as a father anymore or ever again. Mikoto looked surprised for a minute, but then went back to comforting her pseudo-son. Then don't. If you truly feel that way, then come here and live with us. We will always love you no matter what. If you don't want anything to do with your old family now, then you accept me as your one and only mother." Naruto smiled up at her and nuzzled himself further into her neck. They remained there in that position until they fell asleep. Uchiha household, next morning. After waking up in a rather compromising position on the couch, Mikoto could be seen preparing breakfast in the kitchen, with a smile on her face for some reason, while Naruto sat at the kitchen table. Naruto noticed her drastic change in mood since yesterday. "You seem different today, Mikoto-chan." Mikoto looked up with a small blush on her face, remembering waking up with his face in between her breasts. "I suppose I do feel like something has been lifted off of my chest. Is different good?" He smiled at her softly, "Yet the different is good. I like seeing you happy." Mikoto could only blush a little darker at that charming smile. "Are you planning on going back to the academy today?" Both Naruto and Satsuki hadn't been to the academy since the day of the massacre. It wouldn't be good to miss too many days of the academy. Well, for Satsuki, it wouldn't. She would fall too far behind the rest of the children her age. Naruto just didn't care about it anymore and already knew everything they had to teach. Satsuki hadn't been as broken as Mikoto had anticipated. The older woman had thought that Satsuki would become depressed at the loss of her father and the rest of the clan, and later become obsessed with revenge against Itachi. The difference that she noticed was that her daughter had become even more attached to Naruto and refused to let him out of her sight. She was getting a bit obsessive about her brother figure, but it was still endearing in a way. Naruto's eyes grew colder at that last question. "No, I don't think I'm ready to see anyone from my former family yet. Seeing their faces would only serve to remind me of all of Minato's betrayals. It somehow feels like he's doing this to spite me, to tell me that I should never have been born and that I don't deserve to be happy. I know that probably isn't the case, but I still need time to think about everything that has happened." Mikoto was a little surprised at his declaration, but her eyes then filled with sadness, remembering how he felt about his birth and his old family. Honestly, to anyone who knew the whole story, it would seem like some kind of sick plot just to make Naruto suffer. She broke herself from her thoughts and continued the conversation, knowing Naruto could have ended it with that. "Well then, what will you do today? I know you aren't just going to sit around the house all day. That isn't like you. Or do you plan on spending some time with little old me?" Naruto just chuckled dryly. "As tempting as that sound, no. Every time I look in the mirror, I see that team looking right back at me, mocking me. I look too similar to him for my own liking. I need to change my appearance a little, plus I have some other things due. I need to get stronger so nobody can take away my family ever again, and I know just how to do it." Naruto ended with an evil smirk. He had tried to open the scroll that Shursui had given him on his birthday, and this time it actually unrolled. The scroll was filled with dozens of different jutsu, including a few kenjutsus. Naruto came to the conclusion that the scroll would only be able to open upon his sensei's death. Shursui had known that he would die that night, and yet he still went through with the plan. He had wanted Naruto to be able to protect Mikoto and Satsuki in his stead. Before Mikoto could ask what he meant, Satsuki came running out of her room and latched onto Naruto's arm, rubbing her cheek against his, much to his annoyance. Ka-chan, what's for breakfast? I'm starving, then I need to rush to the academy, or I'll be late. You can be late to the academy every once in a while. After all, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Makoto walked over and placed a plate filled with a large piece of toast topped with butter, ham, eggs, and a green salad on the side in front of each of them. She then walked back to the kitchen to grab her own, then sat down with them to eat. "It's a dekamasu," they all announced before starting on their meal. Satsuki chose to speak in between bites of food. "Amni-san, are you going back to the academy today too?" "No. I have a few things I have to take care of before I return. Besides, there isn't really much of a point in me going. I learned pretty much everything they teach either on my own or during my training with Shursui." Naruto and Makoto had agreed that they would keep the reason of the Uchiha massacre a secret from her. Letting the younger generation of Uchiha know about the truth will be going against everything that Itachi and Shursui worked so had and gave up their lives and freedom for. Besides, many of them were young and could not truly understand the coup of the Uchiha would have. Neither Naruto nor Makoto had much love for the village or what it stood for, but so many of their friends and family gave their lives to protect the village, so they would try to honor it the best they could. Naruto noticed Satsuki's downcast expression and chose to reassure her. "Don't worry, Satsuki, I'll start going again in a few weeks, a month at the most. Besides, I don't want you falling too far behind me, so you better step up your game." With that said, he poked Satsuki in the forehead with both his index and middle fingers, like he had done for years, after which she just pouted. After breakfast, the young Uchiha left for the academy, leaving Naruto and Makoto behind. With Satsuki gone, Naruto decided to start his day as well. "I think I'll get going too." Naruto started toward the door, but quickly paused, as if he had forgotten something. He turned around and walked to Makoto and gave her a small blush on the cheek. With that done, he left. Makoto's face was as red as Kushina's hair and couldn't form coherent thoughts for a minute. Though after that her mind started to wander to more explicit scenes, the memories and pain of the last few days forgotten. Village streets. Several minutes later, Naruto could be seen walking through the village streets, which is strange in its own right. After all, being the only student of Shunsure, no Shursui, you begin to pick up the habit of shining everywhere you go. However, Naruto was using to this time to think in order to collect his thoughts. He had been so busy the last few days comforting Makoto and Satsuki that he hasn't had much time to himself. In fact, this was the first time that he had been on his own since the day of the massacre. "The first thing I need to change is my hair. I will not walk around this village with this godforsaken blonde hair. Had I been born with red hair, like Kushina, this wouldn't be as big of an issue." Our currently blonde friend soon found himself outside the best barber shop in Konoha. Why were they the best? They could cut your hair into any style, even if it went against what your hair did naturally. It was also owned by retired shinobi who were extremely skilled in chakra dyeing. Chakra dyeing can only be done by customers who are able to use chakra. Chakra dyeing is a process where the customer infuses their chakra into hair dye, in which the chakra makes the hair dye permanent. It can only be removed by exposing the hair to the person's chakra. And this was exactly what Naruto was here for. I guess I could also use a haircut. I haven't gotten one since before my coma. With those thoughts running through his head, He walked into the shop and was greeted by a man in his mid-60s with a slight limp in his step. "Ah, Naruto-sama, what can I do for you today?" Naruto was glad the man didn't call him by his surname. Had he done so, Naruto may have melted the man's flesh off. "I've come here for a haircut. As you can see, it has gotten quite long. Too long for my tastes. And more importantly, I came to get my hair chakra dyed." The man stroked his beard. Yes, you do look like you are due for a haircut, but many people in the village would kill to have your particular shade of hair. I'm surprised you want to get rid of it." Naruto's emotionless expression turned into a scowl. "I'm not the biggest fan of it." The man noticed the underlying disgust in his voice, but chose not to comment on it. "All right, Naruto-sama, just hop onto this chair and describe to me what kind of hairstyle you wanted." Naruto smirked as he knew just what he wanted. "All right, well, first." 2 hours later, a young man with wavy black hair that naturally parted in the middle and bangs on the side of his face that refused to touch his forehead walked out of the barber shop. This young man looked like the spitting image of a young Portgasty ace, a man he admired more than anyone. Man, that took longer than I thought it would. Chakra dyeing sure does take a long time. Well, whatever, I'll never be doing it again if I can help it. As Naruto walked down the street, his mind began to wander. His mind immediately went to Shursui. He really missed his sensei. He was like the older brother he never had. Hell, he had raised Naruto better than his own father had. The new Ravenet just couldn't bring it in himself to forgive his father for everything Minato had done to him. His eye caught the Yandame's face on the Hokage monument, and he remembered what Portgasty Ace once said to Hagoromo. "Do you know what it really means to forgive someone? Forgiveness means accepting all of the betrayals that a person committed against you. It isn't as simple as people think. Could you forgive Ka-san for all of the pain and suffering that she had caused to the people of this land? Forgiving her for all of her sins is no different than telling all of the people that their suffering was worth nothing and that we don't care about what she had done. I can't do that. I can't just accept what people have done without looking at their past betrayals and being able to believe that they won't do the same thing again. That is why I don't believe in forgiveness. You don't need forgiveness for the people who will stay at your side, no matter what. The people who have always been there for you will never need to be forgiven." People will then ask why I can't just forget everything that happened. People always try to forget and move on, but does that really happen? Would you be able to look at Ka-san's face and be able to forget everything that she ever did to us, to our people? No, you will always be reminded of the past. That is why forgetting is impossible. And would you want to forget anyway? The past is what shapes us, what makes us who we are today. Should we change who we are just because it's at a person's convenience? I refuse to do that. Always remember, I do not forgive and I do not forget. These are two of the most important ideals that I live by. When those memories surfaced in his mind, he had made his decision. He would live his life just as Ace had. Ace had been a man that Naruto respected above all others. He had been a man born with no special traits or abilities, but he still rose to the top in a world riddled with war and helped put an end to the tyrant seeking to control mankind. While his brothers sought noble dreams such as peace and harmony, Ace had never been influenced by them. He lived his life of his own accord and only sought two things: the answers to his lifelong questions and freedom. Naruto would live his life the same way. It was then that something caught his attention out of the corner of his eye, a tattoo shop. Naruto smirked and headed inside. Academy. Satsuki was very irritated at the moment. The first thing that happened when she walked into class this morning was that everybody rushed and crowded around, giving their condolences. These people weren't there when me and Ka-chan needed comfort, so why should they pretend to care now? Satsuki thought with a frown. The only one who actually showed that he cared about us was Naruto and I. Yes, Satsuki saw the truth. Her classmates didn't really care about her. They cared that she was one of the few survivors of the Uchiha clan. Even before the massacre, she was only popular because she was an Uchiha and everyone knew that she had received previous training. Really, all she had previously done was unlock her chakra and learn the Katon, Gakyaku no Jutsu. After it was the Uchiha's rite of passage. Satsuki was sitting through another one of Irika's boring lectures. She was beginning to see why Naruto disliked the academy so much. Pretty much everything Irika was going over right now would never be used once they were outside of the academy. She just wanted to get straight to shinobi training and skip all of the useless civilian lessons, but she knew she would have to sit through them for the better part of the next few years. The Ravenet looked to her right and glared at the three Uzumaki Namikaze's siblings that were in class today. Nawaki was in the back, sleeping through the class as usual. Narumi was gossiping loudly with Ino, and Natsuki was sitting there quietly next to Hinata. Satsuki scoffed as none of them seemed worried or even troubled in the slightest about their missing brother. TCH, they haven't even noticed that Naruto and I isn't in class today. They can't even imagine how much pain he is in. This only proves that they don't even deserve to be in his presence, and that I am his one and only Amudo. I wonder what he's doing right now. Naka Shrine. Naruto had already entered the Naka Shireen and removed the seventh tatami mat from the far right, after which he performed the necessary hand seals to remove the stone blocking the way to the secret meeting place of the Uchiha clan. This is where the Uchiha had met in order to discuss plans for the coup d'etat. Naruto had changed his attire since this morning. His previous clothes had been covered in hair, disinfectant, and a little blood. He now donned attire similar to an Uchiha's. He wore a high-collared gray shirt with an Uchiha crest on the back. Mikoto had given him a few sets of extra clothes since he lived with her most of the time. He also had on knee-length black shorts and gray shinobi sandals. His left bicep was covered in plastic wrap because of the new tattoo on his arm. The process of getting a chakra tattoo was extremely painful, so very few people got them. Having your side ripped open by your cubified sister does have its advantages. The process was similar to chakra dyeing. Naruto had poured his chakra into the ink, and from there on the process was the same as a regular tattoo. However, because it was infused with chakra, it would grow along with his body. After a few hours, it was finished, and they healed the skin with medical ninjutsu. It was an incredibly efficient process. Naruto had gotten Ace's trademark ASC tattoo. He even got the crossed out as, however, this wasn't a tribute to Sabo. It was a tribute to Shursui. It was also out of respect for Ace and a symbol to mark a turning point in his life. He would live his life on his own terms, and he would live free. He no longer cared about being accepted by the Uzumaki Namikaze family. He no longer cared about receiving training from them. He no longer cared for Jiraiya and his foolish prophecies. No, this was the life of Naruto, and he would live how he wanted. In fact, he would no longer even refer to himself as Uzumaki Namikaze and would legally change it as soon as he could. In the room stood a stone monument depicting all of the Sharingan. There was much more on the stone, but Naruto wouldn't be able to decipher it. For that, he would need the Rinnegan. To be honest, he didn't care what the stone said. He had already learned everything it said from Shursue's memories, and he had witnessed the beginning of chakra itself. He walked up to the stone and performed another set of hand seals, after which the stone started to rumble and then rise into the air. What it revealed was a much longer stairwell than the first stone. Naruto started down the pitch-dark stairwell, and as he did, the torches adorning the walls slowly started to light up. After 5 minutes of continuous walking, he finally arrived at his destination. Naruto had arrived in a room with light gray colored walls. In front of him were 2 large concrete doors with a barrier protecting them from outside entry, and a large seal array on the left side of the room. He remembered exactly how Ace had set up this room and what to do. The Ravenet moved in front of the sealing array and bit his thumb to draw blood. In blood, he drew a pattern of 9 Magatama in the center of the sealing array, and then drew a line from each of them into a single point at the center. He placed his hand on the center and concentrated his chakra into the seal. The barrier dropped, and the doors slowly started to open. The doors revealed a large cave-like room, easily the size of the Konoha Coliseum, where the Chunin exams were held. Naruto marveled at all of the seals covering the walls that were used to prevent people from entering without doing what Naruto did, and that would prevent any damage to the cave walls from either the inside or the outside. He silently noted that this place would be perfect for training in secret, but then he saw it. He finally found what he had come here for. At the other side of the cave was a large black and gold chest. Naruto slowly walked across the room until he was standing in front of the chest. He noticed the seals on it and drew the same pattern that he did to get into the room. After completing the pattern in blood, the seals on the chest started to glow bright blue until they broke and revealed what was inside. Inside of the chest was a leather-bound journal, an orange cowboy hat, and what he had hoped would still be there. The final item was a bright orange fruit that had an odd-shaped stem with flame-like patterns completely covering the fruit. This was Ace's chakra fruit, the Mera Mera no Mi. Naruto wanted to eat the fruit first and opted to read the journal. He opened the leather notebook and read the first passage. To whomever is reading this, my name is Portgas Ace. The fact that you have been able to get into this cave and are reading this means that you have been chosen to be my reincarnation. As for the reasons of why you were chosen, I'd say that it is your conviction or ideals. Or at least that is probably why I never really understood the whole reincarnation deal, but my brother Hagoromo did, and that is the reason I have chosen to leave behind what may help you with your journey. If Hagoromo was right, then you've probably seen my memories to a certain degree, but I've left some notes in this journal just so you don't strain your memory too. You've really seen my memories, then there are probably a disturbingly large amount of parallels between us. For the sake of both of us, I will give you one piece of advice. Live life the way you want to and enjoy the journey. I've already lived mine, and I eventually found the answers I was looking for. You will too eventually. Bolgad DS. Naruto smiled a little and turned the page. It was a passage about the fruit he had found. If you're reading this, then you must be curious about the Maramara no Mi. I suppose I could give you a little background on it. The Maramara no Mi is a Logia chakra fruit. This means that your body can actually turn into the element and make you intangible. It will also give you unparalleled control over fire and heat. The fruits from Ashiju are made from natural energy itself, and fire is one of the most powerful forces of nature. This was the fruit that I ate and enabled me to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya alongside my brothers and the eaters of the 4 other fruits. These 5 fruits were comprised of the 5 natural elements: fire, water, earth, lightning, and wind. It was these 3 fruits that eventually lead to what are now known as elemental affinities. There are only a few weaknesses of each fruit. Each of their intangibilities can be negated through the use of haki, or what you may know as a special use of Yin release. You'll read more about it in the later passages. The other weakness is fire's elemental weakness, water. Water can douse the flames of the fruit, but it can be overcome by producing more heat and turning it to steam. One last thing, if you do eat this fruit, then you will never be able to use another element for as long as you live. That is why it is called the Maramara no Mi. You become fire itself. Besides all of this, I'll leave the rest to you. Polgat DS. Naruto flipped the page, and it was a list of techniques that he could use after eating the fruit. He decided to save the rest of a journal for a later time and sealed it into an empty scroll he had in his pouch. He did the same with the hat, noting that he should get replicas made, as this one was quite old, though he did like Ace's style. Next, he picked up the fruit. Naruto stared at it intently before slowly opening his mouth to take a bite. He noted that it was quite juicy, but nearly spit it out after the taste reached him. The fruit tasted like hot ash, but he steeled himself and decided to eat the entire fruit. He may have let out a few tears after, but that was a story for another time. Naruto closed the chest and looked around the cave. This place would make the perfect training ground to test out my new abilities. With those thoughts, he spent the rest of the day working on gaining control of the Maramara no Mi. Uzumaki Namake's estate. Tsunade had just made her way into the compound. She was curious. Ever since Naruto had gotten out of the hospital, she had been wondering about him more and more. She was supposed to be his godmother, and yet she didn't know a single thing about him besides what medical reports said. She didn't even remember ever speaking to him before. Had she pushed him aside just so she could spend time with Nawaki and the girls? Sure, he was older, but that didn't mean she should ignore him. What had happened? This is why Tsunade was on her way to see the Uzumaki Namake's family, to find out more about her godson. She had noticed that Natsuki was the only one from the family who had visited Naruto more than a handful of times. She tried to think back on the times when all of them would spend time together, and it just wasn't there. Or more like he wasn't there. She didn't have a single memory of spending time with Naruto other than when she was operating on him. With those thoughts, she knocked on the door of the main house. She was greeted by an energetic redhead. "Oh, hello, Tsunade. Why don't you come in?" Sure, there were some things that I wanted to talk about anyway. They walked into the living room and were greeted with the sight of Natsuki doing her homework on the table and Narumi reading a manga. Tsunade decided to greet the girls. "Good afternoon, Narumi." Natsuki. Namumi merely nodded, not even looking up from her book. Natsuki bowed and greeted her. "Good afternoon, Tsunade-sama. What are you doing here today?" I actually came by to see how your brother was doing after getting out of the hospital a few months ago. Natsuki looked shocked. Tsunade never came to ask about Naruto before. Kushina's thoughts were brought to her oldest son. I don't think I've seen him in a while now that I think about it. Natsuki-chan, did he come with you from the academy today? Natsuki looked down. Nissen wasn't at the academy today. In fact, he hasn't gone for the past couple of days. Even Satsuki-san came today. The two women remembered the poor girl who was one of the few survivors of the Uchiha massacre, but then they got curious. Kushina started to get angry that her own son was turning into a delinquent. If he isn't going to the academy, then where does he go every morning? I didn't raise my son to be some kind of delinquent. Tsunade and Kushina then noticed Natsuki's downcast expression. I don't know. I don't really talk to him that much in the academy. He's usually either with Satsuki-san or Hana-san. Tsunade was getting irritated at not finding any answers about Naruto. Well, why not? He is your brother, isn't he? Shouldn't you at least be friends with him? I try to spend time with him. I really do. But as soon as the bell rings, all of us, surrounded by the rest of the kinds in our class who just want to spend time with the Hokage's daughters. Nawaki also gets trapped by his fangirls. Yep, somehow he had fangirls. It was still a mystery to all of the students and teachers of the academy. It was probably due to his stuck-up emo attitude. That kind of personality just draws in girls like moths to a flame. Tsunade and Kushina grew tick marks on their foreheads. Fangirls. He's 9 years old. How does he have fangirls? They shouldn't even know about things like love yet. Tsunade screamed. Natsuki just sweat dropped at her godmother. Anyway, that's when Naruto usually leaves. Why don't you just check his room to see if he's in there? Narumi replied, clearly uninterested in the topic at hand. Kushina tried to remember the last time that she had been to his room, but she couldn't, which confused her greatly. She knew that she was a great mother, even if she couldn't train him when he was younger. Yeah, why don't we go do that? With that said, Kushina, Tsunade, and Natsuki went upstairs and stopped just before the door. I don't ever remember coming up here, Kushina stated, rather confused. You've never been up to your own son's room before? Tsunade asked suspiciously. It's not like I went out of my way to avoid him, but we had to train Narumi, Natsuki, and Narumi so that they wouldn't lose control. Tsunade could only roll her eyes, remembering Naruto's previous condition. That just worked wonders, didn't it? Tsunade opened the door, leaving a gaping Kushina and a guilty Natsuki behind. She didn't like what she found. The room was barren. Not only was Naruto not there, but there was nothing in there at all. The only thing that she found was a bed with only a mattress on it. There was dust covering everything, and there wasn't a single personal item in sight. It was quite obvious that nobody had lived there in quite a while. Tsunade's eyes hardened. Would you like to explain what's going on, Kushina? Kushina and Natsuki could only stare on with wide eyes. I don't know what this means. I don't know what any of this means. I swear I saw him here yesterday. I think. You think? It's obvious nobody has lived in this room for months. Natsuki now had tears rolling down her face. Her Nissan was gone, and he wasn't coming back. Tsunade had one thought on her mind. He's not coming back, wherever he is. What could Minato and Kushina could have done? Uchiha household. It was almost 7 p.m., and Naruto had just finished training. He had only been at it for around 5 hours, and he had already gotten basic control over his Logia abilities down, just so he wouldn't burn down the house by accident. He had accidentally burned his shirt off during training when he was first getting started, and as soon as he had gotten back to the house, Mikoto caught a glimpse of his new tattoo. Needless to say, he had gotten a harsh scolding after that. He actually enjoyed it, though. Make no mistake, he wasn't a masochist or anything like that, but it made it feel like Mikoto really was his mother. Not to mention, she looked quite cute when she was angry. Where did that thought come from? Anyway, she calmed down pretty quickly and gave her an edited reason of why he got it. Naruto didn't want her to think he was crazy after all. She quickly understood and actually told his new look suited him rather well in her opinion. Though she was staring at his bare chest quite a bit, he was too muscular for any 12-year-old to be. After that, Satsuki came out of her bedroom and nearly fainted at the sight of a shirtless Naruto. Things at the Uchiha house were always entertaining. "Nani-san, is that real?" she asked, pointing at his left bicep. "It sure is, Satsuki. I just got it today, and I've decided to go back to the academy at the end of the week." She was beaming at that. "Really? I'm so lonely without you there." "Yeah, if I'm gone for too long, people will start noticing I'm missing. Even my family will realize I'm not living at home anymore not too long from now. Plus, we still have 3 more years left at the academy. I can do whatever I need to do during that time, okay?" Satsuki quickly nodded and gave her Naruto and Ai a tight hug, but soon remembered that he was shirtless and ran back to her room squealing. Mikoto had watched the whole interaction with a jealous look on her face, but an equally large blush. Naruto only had one thought going through his mind. Things are going to get a whole lot more interesting around here real soon. Watch me sure sway, Ace. The will of fire still burns. End of Academy Days. Academy. 3 years. It had been 3 long years since the Uchiha massacre, and so much had changed. Naruto had grown strong, tremendously so, far too strong for any child his age to be. He had grown bored of the academy, and once they got into actually shinobi training, he saw how useless it would be. What they would be teaching was pathetic. Shuriken and kunai practice, academy-level taijutsu, and the basic 3 jutsus, hinge, kawarimi, and bunshin. After he saw how pointless it would be to go, he opted to send a Kage bunshin that he had learned from the scroll that Shursui had left him. He only attended the days where they were scheduled to have taijutsu spars so that he wouldn't be found out. Nobody knew that he was doing this, though. Not even Satsuki or Mikoto. Naruto would usually head to the bathroom after breakfast and make a Kage bunshin there. He would send it out to walk to the academy with Satsuki while he would shun Shin to the underground cave for his personal training. Those thoughts brought him back to the Uzumaki Namikaze's family and how they had reacted when they found out that he no longer lived in their compound. Flashback, almost 3 years ago. It had been a few days since the Uzumaki Namikaze family learned that their eldest son didn't live at home with them anymore. They still had no idea where he was. Minato had managed to finish all of his paperwork yesterday, so he was able to take the morning off and walk Narumi, Nawaki, and Natsuki to the academy today, along with his wife. He was deeply worried. They hadn't seen Naruto for the better part of the last week. In fact, nobody had seen him. Minato was starting to think that he had left the village. But for what reason would he do that? It was then that the family of five saw a young black-haired boy walking to the academy with Uchiha Satsuki. What they noticed first was the lightning bolt-shaped scar on his face. One thought crossed through their minds. Is that Naruto? Naruto! Naruto heard a voice call his name and turn around. His face turned emotionless as he saw who it was. Good morning, Hokage-sama, Kushina-sama. Minato and Kushina were both shocked at how he addressed them. Naruto, what happened to you? Your hair? That tattoo? What is all of this about? Minato couldn't believe it. It was like he was staring at a completely different person. That is none of your concern, Hokage-sama. I much prefer my new appearance compared to how I used to look. He really didn't want to have to explain his choices to these people. There was a moment of silence. It was clear to his parents that they would be getting any answers about that subject, no matter how much their parental instincts wanted to object. It was Kushina who chose to speak, a bit unnerved as she stared into Naruto's lone eye. You want Naruto? Where have you been the past few days? We haven't seen you at all. So they finally found out that I haven't been living at home for the better part of the past 2 months. They've probably even gone up to my room and noticed there isn't anything in there. Not that I had much to begin with. I've been at home. I just didn't have it in me to go to the academy these past few days. Minato started to sweat a little at the last few words. Was he close to any of the Uchiha? I can see that he is friends with Satsuki, and he probably knows Mikoto. No, he was probably just comforting them the past few days. Yeah, that has to be it. Satsuki and the rest of the Uzumaki Namikaze's children